Good evening. I hereby call to order the action session of the Board of School Commissioners for Thursday, April 28, 2022. Before we begin this evening, I want to note that in-person language translation services are available this evening. If you're a Spanish speaker and would benefit from language translation headsets that provide real-time translation, please raise your hand and Mr. Burnlow or a member of the IPS team will make sure you receive a headset. All right, thank you very much. We're also very excited this evening to welcome the JROTC cadets from Arsenal Technical High School who will post the colors. It is wonderful to have you here this evening joining us. Would you please stand, those in the audience, please, and for the posting of the colors. All right, how about a round of applause for our wonderful cadets from Arsenal Technical High School. Again, I want to thank them for being here this evening. We'll move to section 1.02 of the agenda, roll call. I want to thank everyone again for joining us this evening. We'll now call the roll. Mr. Burnlow, please call the roll.
Commissioner Arnold.
Present.
Commissioner Collins.
Here.
Commissioner Pritchard. Present. Commissioner Slack.
Present.
Secretary Allen.
Present.
Vice President Moore. President Hawkins.
Present. Thank you, Mr. Burnlow. Moving to section 1.03, adoption of the agenda. The agenda was reviewed Tuesday evening and reflects all the necessary modifications or additions. Reviewing the agenda, are there any requests for changes to the agenda as presented this evening? Do I have a motion to approve this evening's agenda?
Second.
I have a motion and a second on the floor. Commissioners, any further discussion? All right, hearing none, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Hearing none, the agenda this evening is adopted. Moving to Section 2, Special Recognition, specifically 2.01, tonight it is our pleasure to honor and recognize the remarkable career of a recent IPS retiree. Commissioner Collins.
Thank you. The IPS Board of School Commissioners is honored tonight to recognize and honor the retirement of Harold Chip Ford, Jr. Mr. Ford devoted 40 years and 8 months to the IPS community, most recently as a truck driver for the district. Mr. Ford's supervisor in the facilities management team offers the following remarks. The districts would like to take this opportunity to acknowledge Harold Chip Ford. Chip has been with the district for 40 years, and his dedication and service to IPS is a strong testament to his character. Everyone in the district knew that when they needed something, whatever it might be, the first phone call was to Chip. Everyone had Chip on speed dial. Chip was our own superhero. With his beaming smile and tireless work ethic, he made sure that things were handled accordingly, always willing to go above and beyond expectations. Congratulations on a well-deserved retirement.
How about a round of applause? We're going to ask our retiree to please join us up front and center, please.
They said he was on speed.
Do it again. One more round of applause for Mr. Ford and his well-earned retirement. Thank you for everything that you have done for the Indianapolis Public Schools community, particularly its students, sir. Moving forward to item 3, opening comments, specifically 3.01. We'll now move to commissioner opening comments. Do we have any commissioners this evening that would like to offer any opening remarks? Commissioner Collins.
Yesterday, I attended the Junior Achievement IPS Career Fair held at Broad Ripple High School yesterday. Approximately 50 vendors and employers were present to offer presentations about the career and apprenticeship opportunities they offered in each of their businesses. There was a panel discussion also about entrepreneurship and growing one's own business. Several hundred IPS traditional and innovation high school students attended all these meetings, having open interview opportunities as well. I spoke with several business representatives and was impressed with the variety of career streams in each company, from sales, dispatch, installation, logistics, IT, food services, the list goes on and on. Everyone I spoke with was enthusiastic and students were highly engaged, and I think they enjoyed every bit of it. Thank you to all involved to make this possible, this interactive career fair possible for our students, and the wonderful opportunities starting with the opportunity to get jobs for the summer and continue with apprenticeships or other career streams after they graduate from high school. I also want to, on another note, I want to thank Principal Franklin of Arsenal Technical High School and the leadership there for the opportunity to share with them their honors night, student and teacher recognition last night. The culinary services class and teachers outdid themselves in providing stylish table decorations, delicacies, and delicious, healthful dinner and dessert. And I have to say, I had a delicious dessert. The 30 students receiving cum laude, magna cum laude, and summa cum laude awards and their honored educators' recognition for their mentorship was impressive. So thank you very much to all, and I hope that all of our high schools recognize those students who have worked so hard to maintain high grade point averages. Also, for the first time, I had horchata, and it was delicious.
Thank you, Commissioner Collins. Commissioner Arnold.
Well, mine aren't nearly as exciting as yours, but I just wanted to highlight that last week in our work session, we had two really great presentations, one on student services and the other on academic improvement in the things that are going on. I want to invite our work sessions, our public meetings, and I would invite people who want to know. We always have really great presentations and a lot of good information. I would also like to thank the administration for those reports, but I'd also like us to think about how we can get that information out to the public a little bit more, because I think, sometimes there's some negative perceptions of what we're not doing or what some things that we are doing. So I would like to see us be able to get more information out to the public that we as a board get and receive, so that you can also understand the great things that the district is doing for our students.
Here, here. Thank you, Commissioner Arnold, for that remark. Commissioner Slack.
I want to add to Commissioner Arnold's note. I think that we had a young gentleman there as well that got 100% on his eye read, and we sometimes don't hear about those great success stories, and the gentleman showed up and he was remarkable, him and his family. So I just also want to add that note on there.
Thank you for that, Commissioner Slack. Commissioners, any additional opening comments? I do want to note this past week I had the opportunity to attend the IB fifth grade exhibition presentation, which was pretty exciting. And as a parent, that was especially exciting to see my fifth grader present her project. For those that don't know, the exhibition project is a almost a year long or semester long, journey where students identify an issue in our community and our society, identify root causes of those challenges, and really interview experts and really come up with an action plan of a way to address some of the challenges that we all are confronted with in our community. And so was extremely excited to see all of our IB schools present, fifth grades particularly, and so many students presenting their projects with pride. Everything from environmental sustainability efforts to pedestrian safety to animal safety and things of that nature. So I just want to acknowledge and thank all of those young people and students and fifth graders and teachers and the principals and everyone who put that exhibition together this past week at the Downtown Central Library. So again, thank you and kudos to all the students for your efforts this past week and going back a few weeks before that. So with that being said, we don't have any additional opening comments. We will shift then to public comment, section 3.02 in the agenda. And moving to public comments, we will remind our community that we will continue to receive written public comment through our online portal. We have 2 written public comments this month. Those comments have been read by commissioners and are posted on the board docs for your viewing. We are pleased to receive in-person public comment from the community as well. Please note that if you wish to provide public comment in person this month and in future months, you'll need to register on the IPS website. I will remind our speakers that you are allowed 3 minutes to offer your comments to the board. A timer will start when you begin, and I ask that you briefly conclude your remarks when you hear the timer go off. Comments should be directed to the board collectively, should not be abusive or disruptive, and should not address a topic that might be of a confidential nature or that would compromise the impartiality of the board. I will also remind our speakers that while the board is happy to receive your comments, we will not respond or answer to your specific questions at this time. Finally, I also want to note that a majority of those that have signed up for public comment this evening have indicated that they want to comment on one of our specific agenda items. For those individuals, we will hold those items and take the public comment when we reach that particular agenda item. So I wanted to note that and clarify that for those in the audience. Please come to the podium and begin your comments when your name is called. Mr. Bernlar, please call the first speaker to the podium.
Alyssa Coleman. On deck will be Rachel Wright.
Good evening, Superintendent Alicia Johnson and board members. My name is Alyssa Coleman and I'm 19 years old. I'm happy to be back again to stand before the board. Although I didn't attend IPS schools, I have a sibling who currently attends schools within the district. I'm here today because education is knowledge and power. I believe an equitable education is necessary for students to be successful, so it's crucial for us to do everything in our power to ensure gaps that exist are closed. After reviewing data from the IDOE about students on grade level, I was very surprised to find only 5.4% of Latino students in the district are on grade level in both English and math. This number is even lower for Black students, standing at 3.1%. As I said last month, I stand behind the parents and advocates who drafted a parent's vision for a more just and equitable IPS. Replicating successful school models that work for all students could be a solution in this gap. I personally benefited from school replication in Kentucky. Initially, my high school had struggled with career and college readiness. We lacked efforts to support a critical bridge into adulthood. However, school leaders sought to find a better model that could prep students for their journeys beyond high school. My school soon transitioned and implemented a model they found in Chicago. They replicated a school system that had career academies. Career academies are small learning communities where students are put into cohorts. Instead of being in a class of 1,700, students are split into a few hundred. Each academy has its own location in the school, a designated principal, counselor, and a group of core content and elective teachers. Students can now enroll into career academies ranging from engineering, business, education, medical, and emergency services, as well as information technology. This transformed my educational experience. Lastly, the bottom line is there are schools in the Indianapolis area that do not have such large gaps between student performance and that close the opportunity gap. I firmly believe these schools should be replicated. I don't like the idea of my younger sisters missing out on valuable opportunities and accelerated programs. Thank you.
Rachel Wright. Rachel Wright. Maria Cardenas. Maria Cardenas. On deck is Anna Delgado.
Buenas tardes. Me llamo María Cárdenas y soy una abuela que estoy aprendiendo la importancia de abogacía para los derechos de mi comunidad. Esto está muy bien.
I'll be translating. Good evening. My name is Maria Cardenas, and I am a grandma who is learning the importance of advocacy for the right of my community.
Como abuela, tengo un nieto que asiste al Tribal Academia en IPC. Él ha logrado crecer académicamente y estamos muy contentos. Reconozco que los maestros han hecho un buen trabajo y he estado aquí en el pasado abogando para que le compartan el dinero del referado. Gracias por escuchar y compartir. Espero que en el futuro se pueda replicar modelos como este u otros que están funcionando para todos los estudiantes.
I have a grandson who attends Strival Academy at IPS. He has managed to grow academically, and we are very happy. I recognize that teachers have done a good job, and I have been here in the past advocating for referendum money to be shared with them. Thank you for listening and sharing. I hope that in the future you can replicate models like this or others that are working for all students.
Hace años atrás no supe cómo involucrarme en la educación de mis hijos, porque todo estaba en inglés. Mi esposo y yo trabajábamos mucho y mandábamos a nuestros hijos a la escuela confiando el 100% en la educación que recibían. Gracias a Dios ellos les fueron bien, pero ahora veo que hay muchas familias que recién llegados que necesitan un apoyo extra. No pueden simplemente mandar a sus hijos a la escuela sin saber cómo les está yendo.
Years ago, I didn't know how to get involved in my children's education because everything was in English. My husband and I worked hard and sent our children to school, trusting 100% in the education they received. Thank God they did well, but now I see that there are many newly arrived families who need extra support. They can't just send their kid to school not knowing how they're doing.
Hay ocasiones donde los niños sufren de bullying o traumas y necesitan apoyo mental y emocional. Esto no es algo que se obtiene fácil sin pedir esta ayuda y desafortunadamente la mayoría de nuestra comunidad inmigrante no está alcanzando ese tipo de ayuda.
There are times when children suffer from bullying or trauma and need mental and emotional support. This is not something you get easily without asking for this help. And unfortunately, most of our immigrant community is not getting this kind of help.
Estoy aquí para pedir que se enfoquen en justicia del lenguaje, que pasen una póliza en el primer paso para formalmente demostrar al público que IPC está dedicado a liderar un gran apoyo para nuestras familias inmigrantes y lo bueno es que ya han hecho muchos cambios positivos y estamos emocionados en ver más. Así que gracias, equipo de IPC.
I'm here to ask you to focus on language justice. To pass a policy is the first step in formally demonstrating to the public that IPS is dedicated to leading strong support for our immigrant families. And the good thing is that IPS have already made many positive changes, and we're excited to see more. So thank you, IPS team.
Ana Delgado.
Buenas tardes, miembros de la Junta. Mi nombre es Ana Delgado y he estado aquí en ocasiones por los últimos 2 años, abogando por la equidad para la comunidad inmigrante ILL. He estado aquí, he encontrado mi historia y fue muy difícil encontrar recursos para mis hijas mayores y mi familia ILL.
Good afternoon, board members. My name is Ana Delgado, and I have been here on occasions for the last 2 years, advocating for equity for the immigrant community. I've been here and I told my story of how it was hard to find resources for my older daughters as an ELL family. Also, how I struggled to get my younger daughters in a school that I can be involved in. And now, thanks to the fact that there are bilingual workers in that school, I'm fully involved.
Y como he batallado para que mis hijas menores estén en una escuela que sí puedo involucrarme por el hecho que hay gente bilingüe trabajando ahí, la población de IPS ha cambiado drásticamente en los últimos 7 años y mi esperanza es que IPS cambie drásticamente como sirve a la población.
The IPS population has changed drastically over the past 7 years, and my hope is that IPS will drastically change how it serves the immigrant population.
Ya no es simplemente meter un estudiante en cursos de ILL y esperar que todo salga bien. Hay una diversidad inmensa dentro de los estudiantes inmigrantes. Algunos califican como ILL y otros no.
It's no longer just putting students into ELL courses and hoping everything goes well. There is immense diversity within immigrant students, and some qualifying as ELL students and others not.
Algunos son de raza blanca y otras morenas. Algunos no son nacidos acá. Otros son recién llegados. Algunos tienen padres que hablan inglés. Algunos no tienen padres que no hablan absolutamente nada de inglés. Algunos han vivido por traumas, otros no. Y mi punto es que no podemos servir a los estudiantes de ILL como si todos fueran iguales, con un examen que determina si eres ILL o no.
Some ELL students are white, brown, or black, and some are born here and others are newcomers. Some have parents who speak English and many have parents that do not speak English. My point is, we can't serve ELL students as if they are all the same with a test that determines whether or not you are ELL or not.
Mi primer paso va a ser formalmente declarar que IPS está aquí para buscar implementar soluciones para servir a esta comunidad con una póliza de justicia del lenguaje. Doy muchas gracias al gran trabajo que ya comenzaron a hacer y continúan haciendo, pero hay que reconocer el trabajo y darle el título que se merece y referir este documento como guía para servir implementando soluciones.
The first step will be formally declare that IPS is here to seek and implement solutions to serve this community with a language justice policy. I give many thanks to the great work that they have already begun to do and continue to do, but we have to recognize this work and give it the title it deserves, and reference this document as a guide to continue implementing solutions.
Espero ver que todos a mi adelante tomen este tema con la importancia que yo lo tomo, porque yo lo he vivido y es muy difícil entender el sistema de educación de tus hijos cuando no hay información en tu lenguaje. Simplemente no quiero que sea una barrera para más familias. Gracias.
I hope to see that everyone in front of me takes this issue with the importance that I take it, because I have lived it, and it is very difficult to understand the education system of your children when there's no information in your language. And I simply do not want it to be a barrier for more families. Thank you.
Rachel Wright.
Good evening. Dr. Johnson and members of the board, my name is Raquel Wright. I'm a member of two daughters who attend Edison School of the Arts. My two daughters, Miora and Mazara, are doing well. They both have their struggles, like many children do. But I'm pleased with our experience at Edison for the most part. All I want is for my daughters to have a fair opportunity to succeed, and for them growing up, and for them to grow up and be their own unique, amazing people. My oldest has so many leadership skills. She's resilient and so mature for her age. My youngest, she's my mini-me. She reminds me of myself at her age, witty and curious beyond her years. I'm proud of them, and I fully believe they're getting the chance to thrive and grow into their best selves. But I unfortunately can't say the same for many of their peers in our city. With only 3% of Black students testing on grade level in IPS in English and math, there are thousands of students who are tragically not experiencing the same opportunities as my daughters, and that's unacceptable. That's why I'm here tonight to join parents who have requested that IPS leaders move forward aggressively on a plan to grow and replicate schools that show evidence of closing the opportunity gap. There needs to be priority placed on building a system that captures those successful schools, that captures the work successful schools are doing. Parents like me have asked for IPS to compile data by next month that lists specific schools where children of color are doing significantly better academically. This data should be reported publicly and then shape decisions around growing schools that are working, regardless of the type of school. Growing schools that close the opportunity gap matters. Anything that doesn't maintain healthy growth will eventually expire. We need healthy models of education that continue to teach and train children. Closing the gap is good for everybody. It's good for the future of our community. Our children will run our city one day. There will be our political leaders that will take our seats as teachers, as political leaders, as school board members, as parents, etc. We have to prepare them for the future. And that begins with the plan today to replicate school models that are data proven to close the opportunity gap. I'm asking the IPS Board of Commissioners and Dr. Johnson to prioritize a public presentation on schools of all types in Indianapolis that are delivering meaningful, better results for our Black and brown children. And even as a parent, I understand it'll take all of us. I had a recent incident quickly where DCS was sent to my home, and it was pretty irrelevant, and it's not a small matter. When DCS is called, it should be recognized as the last final resort for something that matters. Resources need to be provided before we start working and moving towards jumping to conclusions and what we think needs to disciplinary people. But we need to get to a place where we're all compassionate, where we're all working together, we're all considering all these children, and we've got their best in mind before we jump to conclusions and start disciplining without providing resources. Thank you for your time.
Thank you again to our speakers this evening. Moving on to Section 4, Consent Agenda, we'll now move to the consent agenda, specifically Section 4. My apologies there. The items included on the consent agenda were reviewed at our agenda review session on Tuesday and reflect all necessary modifications. Are there any questions, commissioners, or requests to remove any of the items from this evening's consent agenda? Hearing none, do I have a motion to approve the consent agenda as approved?
So moved.
Or as presented? We have a motion and a second. Commissioners, any further discussion? Commissioner Slack.
Yes, I did see information on there on the personnel support report, and I wanted to know the classified resignations. Is that normal towards the end of the year? Sorry, I'm talking to my new member. Sorry.
Dina is coming on as our new Chief of Human Resources, but I believe she'll have some information on this question.
I think it's on now. Okay. It is improved. It is below where we normally are right now. And we see a decrease in that, and we're expecting the trend to continue down. We're less than where we were last month, so we see.
Thank you very much. Appreciate it.
You're welcome.
Thank you, Commissioner Slack, for the question. Commissioners, any further discussion? All right, hearing none, commissioners, all in favor of this evening's consent agenda as presented, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Hearing none, the consent agenda this evening is approved. Moving to Section 5 of the agenda, specifically 5.01, the Audit Committee, I'd like to provide a report on behalf of the Audit Committee if I could. And I first want to begin by first acknowledging and thanking committee members, specifically Matt Kimmick and E.J. Young for their participation, as well as Weston Young and his team for their hard work and diligence associated with the audit process and formulation of the Audit Committee. The Audit Committee met on Monday, March 21st in this room to review the 2021 financial audits for the district. Though the committee will reconvene very soon to finalize the audit, the committee discussed and reviewed the financial statements that were prepared by Crow. Also, I will note that a few small changes were made since the last meeting. Specifically, new amounts from our Innovation Network charter partners were included in the overall financial statements prepared by Crow. I also believe that there are one or two outstanding partner audits that still need to be incorporated at this time. I know Purdue Poly is one. I don't remember if there's another one at this point. Looking at Mr. Young to clarify that. Just one, okay. So I'll remind commissioners that it's the committee's expectation to reconvene and finalize the audit over the next few weeks. So anticipate an update again from the Audit Committee in coming weeks. The second item, the committee reviewed and approved the recommendations of Mr. Weston Young to renew the auditing services with BKD and their cadre of subcontractors for the next 2 years. The 2-year renewal, I'll just remind commissioners, did include a 2% increase over that 2-year period and was also noted in last month's purchasing report. So just wanted to flag that for commissioners if you want to look back at that. So in closing, I'll finalization of the audit is well within reach, and there is more to come. Before we open up the floor, commissioners, to any questions, Mr. Young, I didn't know if I missed anything or if any clarification was necessary.
None noted.
Okay, thank you. Commissioners, any specific questions regarding Audit Committee, the update?
Yes, thank you, President Hawkins. That 2% increase is at the standard every year.
Sorry, when we went for RFP, we had an opportunity to renew, and so when we adopted BKD as the auditor, that was what was agreed upon at that time, and 2% is pretty reasonable. I've heard, talking to some of our innovation partners, some of the audits have increased substantially, more than 2%. So I think it's very, very a good rate of increase for us as a district compared to some others.
Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Allen. Commissioners, any additional questions? All right, hearing none, we'll move to item 5.02, which is the Finance Committee update. And commissioners, we will receive a report on the work of the Finance Committee by Chair Commissioner Slack.
Thank you, President Hawkins. The Finance Committee meeting was held on March 10th, 2022 at 5:04 p.m. The committee was present with Commissioner Will Pritchard, Commissioner Kenneth Allen, and Commissioner Slack, myself, James, Jamaica, Brett, Dan, and Tina. Additional members of the public and IPS staff were present. Weston Young reviewed the agenda and introduced our guests. All committee members introduced themselves. Presentations and discussions were held. Weston reviewed the agenda for today's meeting and discussed the Rebuilding Stronger plan. the budget development, the cash management, and the bond financing. Weston also presented how Dr. Johnson's State of the District impacts the finance and the purpose of this committee. We shared the dates of the next Rebuilding Stronger meeting, which was March 17th. We defined the data related to IPS's story. Then we moved to a discussion about budget appropriation and its relation to the strategic priorities and the long-term implications, especially how future referendums, bonds, and tax rates impact our financial outlook. They shared resolutions and policies and that they hope to bring to the board in the future meetings. There was also an explanation of the upcoming GO bonds and the planned use of them. The closing of the meeting was closed at 7:21 p.m. and the next meeting is scheduled for June 16th, 2022. And we would like to welcome people to come out and be a part of the Finance Committee and get more understanding of what's going on with IPS. Anything else, Weston, I may have missed?
Nope.
Thank you.
Commissioner Slack, thank you for the update, and Commissioners Allen and Pritchard, thank you for your participation and service on that committee. Commissioners, any specific questions related to the Finance Committee update provided by Commissioner Slack? All right, hearing none. Thank you again, Commissioner Slack, for that update. Moving on to Section 6 of the agenda, I'll now turn over this evening's agenda to Superintendent Johnson for superintendent reports and new business. Dr. Johnson.
Thank you, President Hawkins. Good evening, Board of School Commissioners. There are 5 items in superintendent's reports this month. Item 6.01 was our school spotlight. That was presented on Tuesday evening. And so another big thanks to Christine Rembert and members of her team from Francis Parker School 56, who came on Tuesday evening to share about some of the great work happening at their school. Our first item up tonight is item 6.02, which will be an update on the Rebuilding Stronger committee work that is taking place. And so we'll be doing a little bit of a tag team. I'll start us off, and you'll also hear from Andrew Strope, Chief of Staff, Commissioner Arnold, who is serving as co-chair of the Rebuilding Stronger Advisory Committee, as well as Dr. David Hampton, who is serving as the other co-chair of the committee. Andrew, I think you're going to drive. Okay, excellent. So we'll just provide you all with a brief update of the work that we've been undergoing right now through our Rebuilding Stronger Committee. You all are well aware of the ambitious goals we've set for our 2025 strategic plan. We are committed to improving achievement for all of our students with a specific focus on our our Black and Latinx students, increasing graduation rates in our secondary schools, and then increasing the overall enrollment of the district. And so it's important as we consider Rebuilding Stronger and how Rebuilding Stronger will enable us to meet those ambitious goals, we have to ensure that we are creating a family of excellent schools that meet the needs of all of our students. And so you all, after engaging in town halls earlier this fall and hearing from our community, presented to the administration guiding principles, some of which you see highlighted on the screen. What we heard from our community is that we must make sure we have programs and offerings that meet the diverse needs of all of our students, that we need to grow or replicate what is working and has been shown to close the opportunity gaps that we see in academic outcomes. We have to ensure our students have access across the board to high quality and rigorous curriculum, and that it's not just the academic offerings, but also those extracurricular offerings that help to create the enriched academic and school experience we want our students to have. And then we know as a district, we must make sure we have the policies, the practices, and the protocols, as well as systems in place that cultivate the right conditions for student stability in schools, for high quality, excellent facilities that are encouraging and supporting of learning, as well as keep a very close eye on ensuring our fiscal sustainability in the long term and ensure that we are directing our resources to our highest priorities so that the way we spend our money reflects the priorities that we have. We know we can't do it by ourselves. We've been saying that. And so we have some challenges ahead of us. And we have some challenges that we're dealing with now. We have a number of indicators that we've been studying as it relates to facilities, enrollment, our financial state, the experience that students have in the schools. And we know that there are some challenges that are keeping us from providing the kinds of opportunities we want our students to have. So we have to address those. Now is the time to do that. So we know that we need to do some reorganizing of our schools, of our resources, our programs, our facilities to ensure all of those things are aligned in such a way that provide the greatest benefit to our students, which means we're going to be soliciting ideas and feedback from our community as we've been doing for the last several months. They've told us what that end goal is and what they'd like to see for an excellent and equitable IPS. And so now we need to think about and talk about the trade-offs and decisions we need to make in order to arrive at that end state. So to that end, we are creating this reorganization plan, and that will be the outcome of all of this engagement work that we've been doing over the past several months. It will be aligned around strategic priority number 4, which is to operate and fund strategically. And the administration will bring to the board for consideration a plan that will consider potential facilities, programmatic and academic changes, as well as district conditions for implementation over the next 3 years, taking us into 2025. And again, as I've said before, that plan will be informed by the stakeholder feedback that we've heard from our community and responsive to the various factors that we know play into creating the student experience we want across all of our schools. And finally, our targeted date to present that plan to the board is October of this year. And so to that end, I'll turn it over to Andrew to talk about where we are in process so far.
Yeah, thank you, Dr. Johnson. And so I'm going to handle a few slides here that Kelly Frank, who is from Social Legends, has been with us from the start. She's been facilitating a lot of these meetings, so we're very thankful for her. She couldn't make it this evening. But as kind of where we are in the planning process, so as Dr. Johnson mentioned, we started in phase 1, that first row there, with setting a vision and priorities. So I know the Board of School Commissioners held a number of town halls and additional conversations to really set those guiding principles that Dr. Johnson just mentioned. So where we are now is where that star is. We're in the plan and modeling phase. So really utilizing this committee to help deep dive with the administration into a number of variables that we're looking at on a daily basis, just to help us come up with noticings, wonderings, and really help inform an initial reorganization plan that we then hope to take a draft of that plan in that third row, which is phase 3. So looking at doing that in most likely the summer, early fall, and then as Dr. Johnson mentioned, we will bring a final version to the board in October. So we're in phase 2. Phase 3 will be actually taking a draft plan out and having a number of weeks and to do that and a number of conversations, but really grateful for all the committee members for engaging in our current phase 2. And so diving a little bit deeper into the committee, who's on it? So the committee is made up of parents, students, staff, teachers, principals, community members, faith leaders, business leaders from the community, et cetera. So we've got a number of perspectives on the committee. It's also, these meetings are open to the public as well. So we've had a number of members of the public that have come as well and engaged in the conversation, which has been incredibly fruitful and helpful. And so what is the responsibility for the committee? Really just serving as advisory capacity, review, discuss the findings of some of our third-party assessments, so things like facility optimization study results, just really deep diving into those with our team, and then assisting the administration in just taking all of the data and essentially coming up with, like, here's what we notice, here's what we wonder, here's what we want to learn more about. And then as we go a little bit further, and I'll hit this on another slide, hopefully getting to a solution orientation here in the next couple of months. I want to be clear that we're not asking this committee to make a formal recommendation to the board. Really, this is just fact-finding, really getting a lot of valuable perspective, but there will not be some finalized report or anything that this committee is going to bring to the board. We just really want to make sure we're getting as many perspectives as possible as we go through the process. So what is the committee talking about? So we spent each meeting focused on a different piece of the IPS story. We've had 4 meetings thus far, had one yesterday evening at Northwest. So we started the conversation with a facilities deep dive, and I think Commissioner Arnold will walk us through some of the trends from that coming up here. Then we jumped into enrollment and choice. Dr. Hampton will take us into what some of the findings were there. Last night we had a financial sustainability conversation. And so Weston, our CFO, did a deep dive into our finance. A lot of that you're going to see tonight as well in the quarterly finance update. We're going to wrap all that together in May 18th, I think is the next one, May 18th or 19th, where we're going to talk about student experience. So in other words, facilities, enrollment, finance, those are also connected, right? How does that then support the student experience? And then we'll bring all of that together in June and start talking about solutions. So that's a little bit of how things are going. And then what do the committee conversations look like? So we start with defining the why and just hitting that over and over and over again in every session. And then we spend 15 to 20 minutes really focusing on how we got here. So we think it's really important as we're talking about future-facing solutions to acknowledge, how did we get to this point? So we are deep diving into a lot of pre-reads, in particular focused on race in the city of Indianapolis and the state of Indiana. So for example, we've watched an excerpt of Attucks, School That Shaped the City by WFYI, which is just phenomenal if you haven't seen it, but really focusing, on some of those historical policies that have impacted not only IPS, but the city of Indianapolis, the state of Indiana. And obviously, you could talk for days about things like enrollment and finance, housing, all of those things. So we're trying to make sure we are grounding our conversation in the history of the city, the history of IPS. And so there have been some very fruitful conversations that have come out of that. Then we do the deep dive, and then we break into small groups and do a share out of what do you notice, what do you wonder? And so we are, again, 4 meetings in, and so I think I've gotten pretty good at this by now. So I'm going to turn it over to Commissioner Arnold, who's one of the co-chairs, to talk a little bit about what are some of the trends that came out of the facility conversation.
Thank you. And I appreciate the opportunity to serve with Dr. Hampton as co-chairman of this important work. Also very pleased, and I know you mentioned that the public members have come to all of these committee meetings and have actually participated in some of the small group. So it's been very transparent. I want to share with you a little bit about our second meeting where we really honed in on the facilities report that was conducted by an outside entity and given to the district. And it had a lot of information in it. It talked a lot about the condition of our facilities and the capacity at some of our schools. And so there was just a lot of information there. The groups divided up and talked about the information and how they responded to it. So some of the notifications were that some facilities are underutilized, trends relative to geography, choice, and neighborhood and grade configuration. So there was a lot of discussion about where are schools that potentially are newer facilities but are still under capacity, and how does that work and why potentially is that there? And the wonderings included what's the impact of underutilized schools on the broader community and what's played into the decrease of enrollment in some of our neighborhoods. There's a lot of demographic changes that have taken place in our city over the past several years. And to what extent will the district consider facility consolidations, which is something that we have talked about as a part of the plan so far?
Great. Yep. I think Dr. Hampton. Yep. For enrollment.
Good evening to our president, to Dr. Johnson, to the rest of the board, and to all of you here this evening. I'm also honored to serve on this committee as co-chair with Diane Arnold. As we continue to analyze where we are in enrollment, we think about long-term sustainability. We're thinking about the considerations around our student population, and in light of our facilities and the holistic approach with which we are engaged, I want to just share a few of the findings regarding enrollment trends. What we've noticed is, first, proximity boundary drives access to specific schools. Also, a disproportionate number of white students at choice schools. Growth in neighborhood schools is Latino and Hispanic. There's a noticeable increase in enrollment of Latino students. So these are observations, things that we have noticed by way of trends. And then based on the wonderings, what obstacles and policies are we self-imposing to cause these discrepancies. So we have been introspective, and we certainly want to hold ourselves accountable. And so we're thankful to hear from our community. Is access to transportation an obstacle for those wanting to enter a choice school? And we know that there is, of course, a difference between what our traditional public schools offer and then choice schools who do not have intrinsic transportation. We need to talk about noticeable increase in enrollment of Latino students as we talk about racial equity. To what extent will IPS consider fully transitioning to choice model? What would that mean for families who enroll late? And then finally, how do we get information on choice to all families of color so that they have the same access? And so as we continue to analyze and meet, please help us share the word that we do meet monthly at a different location in one of our IPS locations, and we will continue to gather the information for you. Thank you.
Great, thank you, Dr. Hampton. So what are the next steps? As I mentioned, here's what's kind of coming up next in terms of the meeting dates. We met last night, talked about financial sustainability. Next meeting is May 19th. We'll talk about student experience at Anna Brockhausen. And then on June 23rd, we'll bring it all together and start getting towards a solution orientation at William Penn School 49. So we invite whoever wants to come join the conversation to come out with us. Also want to note too, all of these committee meetings are recorded and put on the website, myips.org, as well as kind of one-pagers of here, all the conversation notes. As these small groups meet, they are writing all of their wonderings and noticings on chart paper. We then take that, or actually Kelly, our external partner, takes that, organizes all of that, puts it into a document, puts that online as well, and our team responds to the questions. So if you go to myips.org, all of that is transparent and up on the website as well. So just wanted to make note of that. And Dr. Johnson, I'll turn it back over to you.
That concludes our presentation. I'm sure we'll take any questions from commissioners.
Yeah, Dr. Johnson, Mr. Strobe, Commissioner Arnold, Dr. Hampton, thank you so much for the presentation, and particularly Commissioner Arnold and Dr. Hampton, thank you for your leadership. Commissioners, any specific questions for the administration or any specific questions for the co-chairs? Commissioner Arnold. Alan, wow.
Thank you, President Hawkins, and thank you, Dr. Hampton and Commissioner Arnold and the IPS team for the great work you all doing. Had an opportunity to attend most of these, and so I really appreciate the engagement and seeing and hearing from our various stakeholders and community members. My question is, I know that we record these and put them on our website. How do we engage our stakeholders in our community to let them know that this is available? How are we pushing out to them to let them know that it's there for them to review if they miss those meetings?
I know we're pushing quite a bit on social media. Our schools are aware, so they can put those notices into their school newsletters. I put it as a part of my superintendent video that goes out every 2 weeks. I'm going to look at Shelby in case I've left something else out in terms of getting the word out. I know we've done some radio advertising as well.
So in addition to everything that you said, we also send messaging to families and to all of our staff via the school messenger platform that we use. So those are just a variety of the ways that we make sure we push the messaging out.
Again, thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Allen, for that question.
Just
Commissioner
to
Arnold.
highlight too, what I've noticed is where we have the meetings has an impact on who comes, because last night we had families from Northwest. It was nice to see we had one table of just Spanish-speaking parents who were involved. So I think it's really helped that the meetings have been at a variety of locations, and wherever those locations are, it has seemed to attract people. So maybe they've only come to one meeting, but at least they've had exposure, and I think moving them around has made that easier.
Thank you, Commissioner Arnold. Commissioner Slack.
I want to say thank you guys for all the work that you're doing. Thank you, Commissioner Arnold, for your dedication and your time. I had a question around who actually was attending these meetings, so I'm glad you said that. Are we seeing a mix of attendance with parents and staff and just communities in total? Are we seeing a diverse number of people attending?
I'd say so. I'd say like last night it seemed to be heavier, for example, on parents and families. I know we've had a number of members of our union partner leadership team come to the meeting before that. So I think and then before that we had a number of principals. So I think depending on the location and sort of what's being discussed, we've had a nice mix of stakeholders.
Again, thank you for your work. I appreciate it.
Commissioner Allen.
Question, just a final push. I would just encourage our community to come out to those. They do feed you. I think they've had food at the last ones that I've attended, and so I would just encourage our community to get engaged and check our website to see when the next one is, so that we can really hear your perspective and your voice.
Thank you for highlighting. There is food and childcare. Both of those things are provided, so folks should feel like they can come out and participate.
That's what I was going to say, that it's not unusual to see children there and families there, and certainly the 6 to 7:30 time and having food available is nice. And we've had a variety of food too. We had Dominican food last night, so it's been great. And again, I think the participation, I appreciate inviting, and hopefully, I think the next one's going to be really interesting because it is going to focus on the student experience. And I think that's probably one of the most important things that we're going to be taking into consideration when we create the plan. So again, invite everyone. And I appreciate that some of the commissioners have come to the meetings and taken time.
Thanks.
Thank you, Commissioner Arnold. I just want to note as well, I think during the presentation, we talked about how our work is grounded in really diving into our history and understanding and discussing the impact and the effect of discriminatory policies that have played out across the history of our city. I think that's incredibly important to root ourselves and remind ourselves that's where we begin, is with our history. And also just want to acknowledge, I think, again, to Mr. Strope's comments and echo his remarks that, this is a process that is, again, as Commissioner Allen said, is welcome to everyone. And if you can't attend, they are posted on the website. So whether it be the presentation, the dates of the meetings, the meeting notes, all that information is on the website. And so we ask again, as Commissioner Allen said, I'll echo him again here, is please, there's a chair welcome. Please pull up a chair to the table, because your input, your insights, your thoughts, considerations, concerns are welcome and encouraged and must be. And we encourage you to include your thoughts as part of this process. So again, thank you all. And again, thank you to Commissioner Arnold for your leadership. Dr. Hampton, again, thank you. And we appreciate the presentation from Dr. Johnson and Mr. Strope.
Thank you. Thank you, Commissioner Arnold. Thank you, Dr. Hampton, who's an IPS parent. I should highlight that as well. So we're very happy to have his perspective, multiple perspectives, as a part of our conversation. The next item 6.03, if I can get back to my notes, is a presentation on our food service department and the work that's been happening. That will be presented by Dina Bond, who serves as our director of food service. You all know that over the past 2 years, our food services team has just done incredible work to make sure our students are continued to be fed, to be nurtured, to get access to nutrition and meals. And so I just wanted to personally and publicly express my gratitude to Dina for her leadership of her team. When folks are at home and working from home in March 2020, Dina and team were out making sure our kids were fed. So just very grateful for the ways in which they have not stopped over the past 2 years as we've navigated this pandemic. So I will turn it over to her to talk about some of the great work happening on her team.
Thank you, and good evening, Superintendent Johnson and School Board Commissioners. Thanks for the opportunity tonight to share some more information about the Food Service Department and some of our updates on the work that we've been doing. So tonight I'd like to share with you a little bit more about the food service team, our programs, some facts and figures, some of our key accomplishments, as well as challenges and opportunities, and then some final thoughts. Research shows that receiving school meals improves a student's behavior, concentration, and reduces food insecurity, obesity rates, and poor health. School meals also have a positive impact on children's diets, particularly their consumption of fruits and vegetables. Therefore, our mission statement is, the food service team provides nutritious meals to promote the health and education of our students. The food service team is a group of 154 school nutrition professionals. That includes our school-based assistants and managers, our food center production workers, our drivers, and our food service central office team. You can see there by our demographics that we are a diverse group. We are 84% female, 16% male, 60% Black, 34% white, 3% Hispanic, and 3% other. And we, just like the rest of the nation and our state, are experiencing staffing shortages. We currently have 37 vacancies in our department, and we've been using around 24 employees from temporary agencies on a typical day. And just a fun fact, our longest serving employee is Miss Sandy Thomas at Robert Lee Frost Elementary. She's a food service assistant with over 44 years of service. So we have some longtime members. All of our programs are funded by the United States Department of Agriculture, and in Indiana, they are administered by the Department of Education. Each program has specific rules, regulations, and nutritional guidelines. So the first two programs are pretty self-explanatory, the school breakfast program and the National School Lunch Program. Those are the two programs under which we serve our students breakfast and lunch each day. Next is the Fresh Fruit and Vegetable Program. This offers a fresh fruit or vegetable snack each day to students in grades pre-K through 6 in schools that qualify for that program based on low income. We currently have 32 schools participating in the FFVP. Next, we have the Child and Adult Care Food Program. And under this program, we operate the at-risk after-school supper program, where we serve a supper, or as we call it, a super snack, to those students participating in after-school activities. And then our last program is the Summer Food Service Program, under which we serve the summer meals, not only to our students, but any child in the community 18 years of age or younger. I wanted to talk a little bit about community eligibility provision, because that is the program that we utilize to serve free breakfast and lunch to our students. It is a federal program that allows schools and LEAs located in low-income areas to provide those breakfast and lunch free of charge to their students. CEP does not extend to other programs. It's strictly breakfast and lunch. So those other three programs that I mentioned, FFVP, CACFP, and SFSP, a school must qualify for those programs based on the criteria for those. CEP has been a program available nationwide since school year 2014-15, and that is the year that IPS adopted CEP. It's based on identified student percentage. Those are students who are eligible for free meals without using a household application. So those are students who qualify for state-assisted programs such as TANF, SNAP, Medicaid, homeless or foster students. The free reimbursement rate is calculated by multiplying the ISP by the federal factor of 1.6. And the ISP needs to be greater than 62.5%, because when you multiply that times 1.6, that's how you receive the 100% reimbursement and are able to claim all of the meals at the free reimbursement rate. We are currently in our 4-year cycle that ends after next school year, the 22-23 school year. We were certified previously at 64.38% for our ISP, and we are currently at 59.2%. CEP participation is available to an individual school, a group of schools, or a district. So there's the option to kind of change that up however you can make it work to meet the qualifications. The total annual food service budget is $17.8 million. 86% of our revenue is generated by reimbursements through participation in those programs I mentioned earlier. 14% of our revenue is coming from non-program revenue through our contracts with our external partners, our innovation schools that purchase food from us. As a district, we have good participation in our meal programs. We are estimated to serve 4.1 million meals this school year to the students in our LEA. Our lunch participation is 76.1%, and 64% of those also participate in breakfast. And you can see there by those numbers that we are above both the Indiana and the national average for participation. Our food center produces on average 70 to 80,000 units each day. This includes everything from entrees to fruits and vegetables, those super snacks that I mentioned. And then as a district, we produce on average, in terms of meals, 10,000 breakfasts and 22,000 lunches each day. And I've also included some annual usage numbers there for you because it's people are pretty amazed when they see those numbers of those items. Next, I'd like to touch on some of the key accomplishments in my time as director for the last 5 years: menu enhancements, capital investments, and student engagement and outreach initiatives. The first thing that we decided to work on as a group were our choices. So I was a picky eater as a kid, so I know how it is to, not like a lot of things. So we want to have a lot of choices for our students so that hopefully they can all find something that they would like to eat. So we upgraded our elementary choices on our entrees from 2 to 4, and our middle school from 3 to 5, and our high school from 5 to 7. We also have worked to improve the quality of our foods that we're serving, including whole muscle meats and fresh produce. Additionally, we review nutrition labels and put items through quality and recipe testing so that we make sure that they meet our standards. Another area that we wanted to work on with the menu was the portions, particularly the fruits and vegetables. We really want students to learn to eat healthy and eat those fruits and vegetables. So students in grades K through 8 can select 1 cup each day of fruits and vegetables, so that's a total of 2 cups. And high school students can select up to 1.5 cups of fruits and vegetables, or a total of 3 cups. So that's a lot of food. And I wanted to include pictures of what a full tray looks like. So the top one is a K through 8 tray, the bottom is a high school tray. So as you can see, if you take all of the food that you're allowed to have, it really is a nice full tray. Another thing that we look at when we're creating menus are trends. What is not only what the rest of the school nutrition industry, what are they doing? What do the students see in restaurants? And can we make those work within our nutrition guidelines? This year, we added a plant-based entree choice each day because there is such an emphasis on consuming plant-based diets. We've invested around $5 million in capital expenditures. Some of our school equipment, we've created these flavor stations in our K through 8 schools where they can have all of their different choices of the condiments. We did high school service renovations. When we reinvented the high schools, we looked at the service areas, gave them all the same clean, sleek look, added theme stations, and our creation station, which is our salad and topping bar. We've also purchased cafeteria tables and milk coolers, and in our food service center, new production lines, and replaced our fleet of refrigerated delivery trucks. We've also added software and computerized point of sale for both our production facility and our schools. Our student engagement and outreach initiatives, the first there is the Try It tour. You see the picture of the student holding the yogurt cup. When we have a new menu item, we like to take it to a couple of schools, try it out, see what the kids think about it, and if we want to have that on our menu. Next, we have special treats and celebrations. So the students there are holding the bag of Indiana popcorn they had on National Popcorn Day. You're probably all familiar with our bus stop cafe. That's our school bus that we converted to a mobile food truck where we take it to schools for a lunch celebration and then into the community for summer meals. And we're really excited that after a 2-year hiatus, our Bus Stop Cafe is going back out this summer. We are resuming our old route. We're going to the Martin Luther King Community Center, the Stratford Apartments on the west side, and the Hallville Public Library. So really excited, and all of those community members were thrilled when we contacted them and asked if we could come back. They said, of course, yes. Next, we have food recovery. You see the cart there with the green bins and coolers. If a student selects an item through the lunch line that they choose not to eat and they don't open it, they can put it in on the share cart and another student can select that item. And then if anything's left over after the meal times, the school can choose to adopt food recovery, where they can then donate those food items instead of throwing them in the trash. So we have some that have in-school food pantries, or they might work with an external food pantry. We've had donations to the nurse's office just to have some extra things on hand, or we've even had some schools target a specific family that might need some additional assistance, and so the food items go home with them. And last but not least, they're definitely not a planned accomplishment or initiative is COVID. But as Dr. Johnson mentioned, March 13th, 2020, I definitely remember that day. The team hit the ground running, and through March 13th, 2020, through the end of the 2021 school year, we served approximately 2.5 million meals in a number of ways, including in-person, virtual, hybrid. 900,000 of those were remote. So we, drive-through style, bags of food, just trying to serve our community and the students so that we make sure they have their meals. So COVID is an accomplishment. It's also been a challenge and an opportunity. COVID and inflation have greatly impacted our budget and our revenue. Our 2021 revenue was less than 1/3 of what it was in 1920. We've seen a 17% increase in food costs, and those are rising, and there's really no hope that those are going to come down anytime soon. And these are concerns that aren't unique just to IPS Food Service, but the entire country for child nutrition programs. We've had some assistance. We received $1.9 million under the USDA's Child Nutrition Emergency Operating Fund and $4.5 million from ESSER funds. Additionally, this year we are receiving higher reimbursement rates. USDA is paying the summer food service program reimbursement rates versus the National School Lunch Program rates, but that's likely not to continue next year. So what are we doing to combat the higher prices? We received $700,000 more dollars in commodity dollars this year to purchase products. We are also doing menu shifts whenever we can, particularly with produce. If we can take a higher priced item and mix it with an equally popular, cheaper option, such as pineapple and putting grapes with it, or replacing that pineapple with a banana, which kids love to. We're doing things like that. Also, we are rebidding contracts for more competitive pricing when we're able to. We're putting a couple of those in place already, and we're projected to save about $300,000 by doing so next year. And our revenues are returning to pre-COVID. The kids are back in school and they're eating meals, and so we're seeing that revenue coming back in. Next, we have our external partner food service contracts. So as schools move out of the LEA, our relationship with them changes from one where we are the provider and serving and claiming those meals, and we become their vendor where we're selling them meals if they choose to select us. We currently have 11 innovation charter schools that we are selling meals to, which is about 22% of our daily production. And we consider ourselves an added value vendor for those charter partners. We not only provide a nutritionally compliant menu, but also some standard operating procedures, usage of our equipment, and some administrative support. But with that, we have to make sure we cover our expenses beyond the food. What are our delivery expenses, our overhead and administrative fees? So we update those contracts each year, and we have in the language that we can change pricing to compensate when we have higher pricing. And then lastly there, we have CEP eligibility and participation. So as we see changes to enrollment and shifts out of the IPS LEA, that can affect our student population and thus our eligibility for CEP. And if you recall on one of the first slides, we are currently at 59.2% on our ISP, and that multiplied by the 1.6 doesn't get us where we need to be as far as free reimbursement. There's proposed legislation to increase that factor from 1.6 to 2.5, but we don't have any guarantee of that yet. So we're going to need to closely evaluate that in the fall as we approach April 2023, which will be when we need to recertify for CEP. And to leave you with some final thoughts, it was hard to pick 3 pictures, but we have so many great pictures, but I just love the smiles on the kids' faces in all of these photos. And, we understand the link that student outcomes and good nutrition play, and it's accomplished each day by an incredibly dedicated team that they're here to serve our students. They love our students, and it's an incredibly rewarding career. And we are so proud of our work, and we invite each of you to come visit us at a school, our food production facility. Come see us on the bus this summer. Thank you. Happy to
Thank you,
answer any questions.
Mrs. Bond, for the presentation. And again, I don't think we can thank you enough for, as you reflected back on March of 2020 when the world changed. And so thank you for everything that you and the team did and continue to do in spite of that challenging season of life. So thank you again for that. Commissioners, any questions? Commissioner Arnold and Commissioner Collins?
Great report. Thank you.
Thank you.
And I know that you also do food not only for COVID, but you do it other times when schools are out, I think. Isn't that true? Like
On break times,
On
there are some federal
breaks
rules
and-
around when we can do that, but
and even
sure.
snow days, didn't they do?
Yes, in the past we have, there have been some shifts when we changed the calendar. The stipulation used to be 10 days that we could, if we were out 10 days, we could serve meals. So as we've changed our fall and spring breaks to 1 week, we're not eligible for that program any longer.
Thank you. Is gluten-free an option? Does that work? I just see everything in the grocery store is now gluten-free. So.
Yes, and I didn't mention that, but we do have what we call modified meals. So we have a number of different diets that we work with students. We definitely have gluten-free, dairy-free, different allergens, whatever the student needs, we accommodate those.
And I just wanted to say I love the name of school nutrition professionals, because in my day they were just the lunch ladies. So school nutrition professional sounds much better than the old lunch ladies were. So thank you. Thank you for all that you do.
Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Arnold. Commissioner Collins.
Thank you very much. Your presentation is excellent. I've always been impressed with our food service, the way that we make sure everyone is fed and fed well. And I also want to thank you for your gracious response to my questions earlier in the year, actually probably last fall. And things must have improved because I hear no complaints.
Okay, great.
Commissioner Pritchard.
Okay, thank you. I was thinking while you were talking, this is a difficult role. I have a hard time finding acceptable foods for 2 kids. So, you have a much bigger challenge, so I'm very, very impressed. You mentioned that fresh fruit and vegetable program in the beginning. Some schools don't qualify for that. I'm curious, what are the criteria where a school would not qualify for a fresh fruit and vegetable program?
So their ISP has to be 50% or greater. But even with that, the state takes their allotted grant amount, and they start with the highest need of the schools in the state, and they work their way down. We receive $75 per student. And so they work that funding down until they're out of money. So sometimes in years past, we've seen schools that have had 80%, and there's not enough money.
Okay. And about the ISP, I saw the current percentage is only 59%, so that could have some real budget implications.
Yes.
I guess at the end of the current term, 23-24. What is the ISP? Can you expand that a little bit more? How it's without the use of household applications. What is the household application? And yeah, can you explain that more?
You either qualify for free and reduced meals by submitting a household application, or by we pull the data from the state's database of students who are enrolled in those state-assisted programs. So they're automatically free. And so that's what the ISP is.
Okay. Now I see what you mean by household application. And is the rate of household applications, is that high, or is that?
I think it's an additional about 8%, I believe.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Pritchard. Commissioner Slack.
I just didn't go to Alan first. I was ready. All right. Thank you, Dina, for everything you do with food service. First of all, I sent a quote earlier today, so I kind of want to share it. It said, the service industry teaches soft skills that only recruiters talk about on LinkedIn. Discipline, promptness, the ability to absorb criticism, and most importantly, how to read people like a book. In quotation from me, I see that the need of students that may grow beyond the meal that you are serving. Many students only get served their very first meal of the day with food service workers. The work is thankless, it's fun, it's messy, and the world would be a lot more kinder if some people would just try it out, food service. So with that being said, I own a food truck, so I understand the difficulty in food service and the challenges that you're facing. As I was sit down with some of our middle school students, I seen some of them were not eating or were not thrilled about some of their meals. So I wonder, what's the challenge that you face when it comes to our middle and high school students? I know you said you're a picky eater, and most of them are. So what challenges do you see that you're facing with that?
I mean, I think definitely the hardest with the older students, it would definitely be the consumption of fruits and vegetables. That, you know, they take a piece of pizza and a juice and call it a day. And when you're 16 years old, you're not going to be full off of that. So I'm just trying to start them out early, encourage consumption of fruits and vegetables. We try to have variety. We try to have fresh items, again, so that they can find something that they will eat. But, and you know, at a certain age, particularly middle school, it becomes not cool to eat either. So that's a challenge.
Exactly. I seen that a lot when I came in to kind of help have lunch with my daughter. So again, I want to say thank you for everything that you're doing. I've seen a great change with plant-based foods. My kids eat plant-based food, so I'm very appreciative of the quality of the food. Kiwan is being served to our kids, so it's amazing. Could you tell me a little bit more about the external donations? Like, do you go to second hands with some of your food, or where are some of the partnerships that lie for the food? Where does it land?
On the food recovery?
Yes.
That really is determined at the school level. They take on that program, so I'm not really sure.
Each school does it probably a little different.
Yes.
Okay. Well, I'm disappointed to hear about the calendar changes, which means that we can't get out as much. I would love to fill out how we can fill the blanks in on that. And do some of our choice program schools, do most of them qualify for the program for the fresh food qualifications, or are most of them not on that list?
We have, I believe, 6 that don't qualify.
Again, I appreciate you. You're doing an excellent job, especially with everything that you've been facing.
Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Slack. Commissioner Allen.
Yes, I too want to echo the sentiments of my colleagues and begin with gratitude. Thank you for the hard work that you and your staff do every day. Particularly, it's a special place for me. I think one of the first things I did as a commissioner was, myself along with Andy, had an opportunity to tour your facility, and I have a greater appreciation and a better understanding of what you all do and the hard work you all put in every day. Do have a couple of questions. One is, those 37 vacancies, are those part-time or full-time opportunities? And then the second question to that is, are individuals able to apply via the IPS website, or do they have to go through the temp service? Can you elaborate on that?
They apply on our website. Most of our positions that are open are full-time. Those are managers, Food center workers, those are 8-hour positions. They're 10-month, so that might be a factor. But and we have some assistants that work 4 hours a day, some high school employees that work 6 or 7 hours a day, but most of them are full-time.
Thank you. And then my second question is, I saw the budget's about $17.8 million. Of that $17.8 million, do you know how many MBE vendors we utilize?
Do not.
Okay. Can you get that number for me?
Sure.
Thank you. And then I think that's it. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Allen. Commissioners, any additional questions? All right, I do have one question about, I think I've been reading recently in the headlines that the National School Lunch Program, that we know that there was a waiver that was extended, but I think that ends around the end of the school year, fiscal year. And so I'm just curious about that, what that flexibility allowed for and what that flexibility will mean, or the lack of flexibility will mean going forward. And you may have reflected on that, but I'm trying to connect that headline to sort of what that means for IPS kids.
It probably was the waiver to serve all meals free to students, which didn't impact us because we're already operating CEP.
Right. Okay. Excellent. Thank you.
Thank you so much again, Dina, for the presentation and for all of your work. Appreciate you being here this evening.
Thank you.
Our next item, item 6.04, is our monthly update on our ESSER spending and ESSER-focused projects. And so I will invite Sarah Chin, our Deputy Chief of Staff, for this presentation and update this evening.
Good evening. So as always, I'm here to give you all our update on where we are with our ESSER spending this month. We have just 3 big takeaways that we want to cover today. One is to, again, continue to reinforce how we are spending our ESSER dollars in such a way that drives the strategic plan. 2, we want to always continue to reinforce where the majority of those dollars are going, which is that continued work of ensuring our schools are open and safe to serve all of our students. And then finally, I'm very excited to bring this to you all today. Commissioner Slack, I suspect you'll be particularly excited. We're going to be digging into more data on how our high dosage tutoring program is going. So I'm going to go through this portion a little faster than normal, but we always want to continue to emphasize those key points. So as you all know, we have laid out 4 big goals for our vision for how we intend to spend our ESSER dollars. And I think the most important thing to drive home on this slide is that all of these goals reinforce each other and really just make up the pyramid of the foundational of success that is necessary to ensure our students are on track to recover any lost learning and accelerate learning in response to COVID-19. So you see the base of that, of the framework we've put up here, is to keep schools open and safe. That is the foundational goal that we absolutely have to achieve in order to make sure our students are set up for success, which is why that continues to be such a major investment point for us. Second, we want to ensure that we are increasing our in-person attendance and enrollment, that we're bringing kids back to school and making sure that they are at school every day ready to learn. Next, of course, we want to ensure we're accelerating their learning in ELA and math and recovering any unfinished learning that's happened during COVID-19. And then last of all, we're ensuring we're investing in keeping all of those students on track for graduation, which we know is just critical for their ongoing success in career and life. And again, the point that I really want to emphasize on this slide is that all of these pieces reinforce each other. You can't take away one of these, even things that sound simple, like keeping our schools open and safe or ensuring that students are attending school. You can't take away any one of these and still be able to drive towards our goals of accelerating learning and increasing our graduation rates for our students. So of course, we want to recap the amount of money that IPS has received through ESSER funds. We're looking at about $213 million of total ESSER funds, an additional $78 million that have been passed, that have been given by the state to our Innovation Charter Network schools. And again, it sounds like a completely insane amount of money, but if you look at how that revenue is spread over the next 5 years for us, you'll see it roughly doubles the amount of federal spending that we get. So again, it's a lot of resources, but it doesn't meaningfully change our financial picture. And a point that we always want to drive home, and I'm going to speak a bit about this more today, is how this impacts our financial sustainability. So once again, We know that ESSER has to be spent by September of 2024. We are continuing to invest in the things necessary to just recover from the COVID-19 pandemic. And again, while this is a lot of money, it really doesn't meaningfully change our resource picture. And those things together mean that ESSER is really not a way of solving our long-term financial sustainability goals, nor is it a substitute by any means for the other sources of revenue that we depend on to serve our students. As you all know, so we've spent about $75 million of our ESSER funds so far, and about 3/4 of those have gone towards keeping schools open and safe. Again, you're not going to see a lot of movement here because we have been in a holding pattern with the IDOE around a set of investments. So even things like the tutoring update that I'm bringing to you tonight is not actually captured in this slide, which again, I'd be happy to answer any more questions about, but that is a pattern that you will see in terms of the data that we're sharing with you this evening on our spending updates. And then last of all, before we really dig into some of the great data that we're seeing around our high dosage tutoring initiative, we do want to continue to reorient ourselves in the process of where we are with our ESSER goals at this point. So I'm really excited because I feel this momentum coming as we are transitioning from this winter 21 stage into heading into the spring, where we really, I think, spent a lot of the winter, including the period when Omicron was really impacting our school system, really trying to lay the groundwork or to get the boat in the water, really laying the groundwork for a lot of the initiatives that we're going to be pushing forward on in the months ahead. And I think this spring, and what we'll dig into in a second here as we start talking specifically about things like our high dosage tutoring initiative, what you're seeing is some of that work starting to pay off, really starting to get some traction around some of these major initiatives that we intend to drive all of the outcomes that we've just talked about regarding our ESSER spending framework. But of course, even as we're getting that momentum, we always want to be beginning with the end in mind. And one thing that we do want to begin speaking to today, and that I will be continuing to address in our monthly updates regarding ESSER, is how are we thinking about preparing for our ESSER spending in a way that fosters sustainability? Because these dollars are going away. And at the end of the day, we need to be planning already with the end in mind of what are we going to do when ESSER is gone in September 2024. So one thing we haven't talked a lot with you all is how we think about sustainability on the front end of the ESSER application process. So in the district, whenever someone applies for use of ESSER dollars, we require them to fill out as part of that application process a documentation for their plan for how they will make ESSER sustainable. So even on the front end, we are already screening for sustainability in mind and trying to be incredibly deliberate to ensure that we aren't creating a fiscal cliff for ourselves in terms of the projects that we are greenlighting. And we are constantly sourcing and trying to foster projects that will either have a path to sustainability or are short-term needs that we know that we could eventually sunset when these dollars do run out. Because of course, on the right side of the screen, as we're preparing for the end of this grant, the reality is that every project we start with ESSER dollars will either need to take the place of an existing project that is covered by the Education or Operations Fund or our title dollars. So take the place of spending that is already spoken for, or we will need to seek additional external funds in order to cover those projects, or we will need to wrap these projects up by September 24. So either every project we start with our ESSER dollars, one of these three things is going to have to happen in order to ensure our fiscal sustainability as a district. So I realize that's a bit of a grim transition to then go into tutoring and all of the great success that we are seeing there. So I'm very excited to share with you more updates on our tutoring pilot. So as you know, I shared a little bit with you all last month in my ESSER update. We have 26 schools that are doing some form of tutoring pilots of more than 1,000 students at this point. And we've added 2 more schools since we presented to you last month. We are doing a combination of in-person and virtual tutoring pilots, and also a combination of during-school intervention block-based tutoring and after-school tutoring. And I'm really excited to talk to you all more this evening specifically about those during the school day intervention blocks that we are doing. There we go. So I know there's a lot of the text on the screen, but just to share with you all what we are thinking about with our goals for these spring pilots. What are we trying to accomplish? And you see on the far left here, we've named what are those things that we want to hold tight across all of our models, even as because there's no one tutoring model or one tutoring provider that's going to meet the needs of all of our students who have unfinished learning at this point. So we've tried to be very clear, what are the things that are the non-negotiables for us? What do we want to see in every model that we pilot across the district, regardless of who is providing it or in what context it's being provided? Then in the middle, you see more of like, what is the purpose of the spring pilots? What are the places where we want to learn more and understand things like what grades should we be focusing on? Where are we getting the most traction with different types of models? And then on the far right, I've recapped a little bit about where we are at this point in the spring semester and what have we really seen accomplished at this point. So I think the place that I want to dig in here is that third row, when is this happening? The thing that we are very committed to is that in any tutoring model we put together, it is high dosage tutoring. So it meets the definition of high dosage tutoring. We need at least 2 hours of tutoring per week. It's done in the context of consistent relationships where kids have access to the same tutor every time. And outside of that, we're pretty flexible in how this happens. But one thing that we've been piloting a couple of different approaches this spring on is, are we going to do our tutoring during the school day when students are there? Or are we going to, in effect, extend the school day by providing after and before school tutoring? And we're trying pilots of all of these options to see what is most effective for both attendance and then academic achievement. So let's dig a little bit in particular around our Tutored by Teachers pilots. So Tutored by Teachers is a company that we are partnering with to provide virtual tutoring. So they have a cadre. The big advantage of this is that we can source tutors from all over the country. So they have a cadre of teachers who are licensed teachers who provide tutoring to our students through the technology that IPS has already invested in a range of subject areas. So as you can see here, we've done 4 different approaches to how we could practice. And I realize there's a lot of data on this slide, but again, this is all in that spirit of continuous improvement, trying out a lot of different things and seeing what's working for our kids. So we've tried out 4 different approaches to how we are structuring these tutoring pilots, where we have families opt in. We have on-site tutoring that happens after school, so kids actually just stay after school and conduct tutoring. We have, because it's virtual, off-site after school, so kids go home and then can complete their tutoring at their own homes with their own devices, again, IPS-issued devices, or then tutoring during the school day. And what we've learned is really this really isn't surprising, but it's important to have data that backs this up, is the more involved IPS is in providing the protected space and time for this, the better the attendance that we're seeing at that tutoring sessions. So you can see at the bottom, for our tutoring that's happening during the school day, we're seeing more than 90% attendance. Kids are going because it's during their intervention blocks, it's happening at school, there's IPS staff available to support them. There's no reason to not go and access tutoring in that context. And then we contrast that, of course, with the lightest touch option. Even though this is the most flexible, this is the one that's most easily accessible to all of our families, letting families access tutoring on their own, off-site, at their own homes after school. We're seeing much lower attendance there, even lower than 20% in some cases. So of course, what we're learning from this, again, we're really trying to approach this with an intensive spirit of continuous improvement, is we wanted to continue to push on piloting these during school, during intervention blocks tutoring models. So last week, we expanded to 2 additional schools. We've launched during school tutoring pilots at Clarence Farrington and Ralph Waldo Emerson, looking specifically at K2, so we're not disrupting grades that are currently in the middle of state testing, while also prioritizing grades that we know have been highly disrupted by the COVID-19 pandemic, some of our youngest students. And we are continuing to collect attendance on the effectiveness and the attendance, of course, the level of engagement in our during school tutoring pilots in both of those schools. So all of this sums up, again, I know this was really in the weeds around which schools and which students, but I just think it's so important for illustrating how we are approaching this with this mindset of continuous improvement in everything we're doing, trying to be excellent stewards of our ESSER dollars. To set the vision for you all and where we are headed, we are looking to a fall 22 where we are continuing to prioritize early literacy at our emerging schools. And we're thinking about that really at those during school, during intervention blocks tutoring, continuing to look at our emerging schools and prioritize early literacy in those schools. Second, in terms of who is providing that tutoring, we're continuing to scale our partnership with Tutor by Teachers in order to provide more intensive tutoring options and continuing to source community partners, which I hope we'll have updates on that for you very soon, to continue to provide a combination of in-person and virtual tutoring. Again, we are in terms of like based on what we've learned, we're working hard to make sure we are as much as possible providing tutoring during those existing literacy intervention blocks. But we also are trying to track towards expanding more after-school tutoring, just because that is a way to make sure that we are really making this option available to all of our families, even if we're not getting as high of a level of uptake as we're seeing during those intervention programs. And then, of course, last of all, just continuing to ensure that we are monitoring the content of what is being taught, making sure that this is aligned to our curriculum, and ensuring that this is best designed to help our students achieve at high levels. I think this is the end of my slide deck anyway, and I will stop.
Sarah, thank you for the presentation. Commissioners, any questions? Commissioner Arnold?
I have two questions. At one time, we talked about potentially doing something with high school students, potentially our students at Christmas Attucks that may be in the education choice option or whatever. Any thoughts to that? Any progress on that? Or
Yeah, no, I appreciate the question. That has not been one of our high priority items for the spring, just based on like where we've been able to get traction the fastest. But that is definitely something we are continuing to track towards, because we do have 2 more years of tutoring pilots that we need to have underway. And as we continue to expand, we're going to continue to need that additional capacity.
And my second question is, my understanding is that there was state legislation passed with families whose children don't pass iLearn have access to $500, but if the district puts in $250, then they can get another, so it can end up being $1,000. How does that relate to us? Is that something we're participating in, and what would that look like?
So we haven't decided whether or not we're participating in it. Right now, what we are doing is our due diligence on the front end to understand exactly what that would involve. I would say that we are eager to take advantage of any additional opportunities that provide more opportunities for our students. So this phase of work we're in right now is just doing that due diligence to make sure we understand exactly what it would take for us to implement the recommendations in that
What's
bill.
the timeline? I'm assuming if they wouldn't even know who would participate until the iLearn scores would come out. So I guess I'm a little fuzzy on how that even all works.
Yeah, so the legislation has passed, but the Indiana Department of Education hasn't yet produced the administrative guidelines for how they'll actually administrate those dollars and funds and how it works. So it's passed, we just are waiting for that guidance from the state.
It's not implemented yet or into the stage.
Exactly, yeah.
Okay, so you'll keep us updated on that and where?
Absolutely.
I mean, it sounded great, but my understanding was the money goes to the parents and the parents can decide, and that seemed, I know some parents can do it, but my concern is the students that need it the most may not have the parents that would know how to even access those services. So
Right, yeah. So I think that guidance from the state will be really important. And I think to Sarah's point, we have a lot of data that's telling us what we know is impactful. So again, we can maximize those resources. But yeah, we'll keep you posted.
All right, thank you. Thank you for the presentation.
Thank you, Commissioner Arnold. Commissioner Collins?
Thank you for all this information. It's excellent. Just for clarification, on slide 16, it says that that all students who want tutoring will have access to virtual tutoring after school. But on slide 14, that was less than 20%. Or am I looking at the wrong box there?
No, you're absolutely right. So the way we've been thinking about this is we are tracking both towards equity and towards equality, which is the reality is, the way we've been thinking about this as a team is, the reality is, like, while we have these resources available, we want to be the kind of school system that can guarantee that tutoring is available to every family who wants it. That's just something that we want to be able to stand behind. And we think the way to be able to do that is to set a goal of online tutoring being available to every student who wants it. We're not there yet. We're probably not even going to be ready to pull that off by the fall, but that's something that we want to track towards as a goal while we continue to collect data on the effectiveness of this model. On the other hand, we know where we are having the highest impact is those during school tutoring sessions. But those are also the most difficult to implement. They require more intensive collaboration with teachers because you have to literally be in during the school day. They require supporting principals to redesign their schedules. They require us to find daytime availability. That's just like hard, that's very particular to the schedule of a school. So we know that those types of interventions just take more time to design and execute. And because of that, we're really making sure that we're driving those resources and those efforts to those emerging schools. So we are prioritizing our highest need schools with those more labor-intensive interventions. So if we can track towards both of those goals at the same time, what I hope we are doing is creating the circumstances where we are driving more resources to the kids who need it most, while also just being the kind of district that's responsive to our families and providing a service to anyone who wants it.
I think it's honorable and wise to offer the tutoring to everyone, but because of the less than 20% attendance, then it's like a throwaway, seems to me. And if your family opt-in after school is at 90%, then why was that sort of not chosen?
So I'm sorry that I've not presented the data clearly on this slide then. The family opt-in and the offsite after school are in effect the same practice, but the way that students were referred to it was different. So if you look at McClellan and Merle-Seidner, those are cases where when we went to this family of schools and said, we would like to provide online tutoring to your families, they took different ways that they decided to recruit families. For McClellan and Merle-Seidner, what they decided to do was they just asked their families, like, this is an opportunity, who wants it? And we saw a huge uptake among those families. Those are obviously really different schools, but it's also a different way of fostering that buy-in. The schools that are on the far right here, they basically had the same model for delivering tutoring. The only difference is that teachers signed students up for it and then tried to incentivize those students and families. So I think if we said online tutoring is available to anyone who wants it, families can sign up, I think we would see attendance and uptake more similar to what we see in the McClellan and Merle-Seidner case. I actually think it's more similar to that model. The concern that I have, and that's why we're continuing to push on tutoring with multiple fronts, is we know that the populations of those schools are very different, and we need to then put our equity hats on to ensure we're actually supporting students to access those resources.
I would agree with the equity hat. I don't see that. If the data shows that there's no follow-through or limited follow-through at 20% attendance, then that's an ineffective method, and so something else should be done. So just FYI.
I think you're right. What Sarah is saying is instead of telling teachers assign them and then trying to convince families, we would do the family opt-in, which is go directly to families, let them opt in, which is producing a higher outcome. So I do think you're right. There needs to be a shift probably in how it's presented to families versus on the front end versus on the back end.
Thank you. Thank you. I mean, it's a tremendous, tremendous effort, and I appreciate it.
Thank you. And your feedback is well heard. We are very concerned. 20% attendance is not acceptable, and we are continuing to both implement strategies to try to improve attendance in those programs, while also expanding in the places that we know are more effective.
Thank you, Commissioner Collins. Commissioner Pritchard.
How are you measuring academic effectiveness?
So we don't have data on that yet, but of course I'm hoping to bring that to you all this summer. So we have been using pre and post screeners that are aligned to our curricula and aligned to iLearn in order to monitor the effectiveness of these interventions. So we will have, I hope, very solid evidence either way of the effectiveness by the summer.
Based on iLearn scores, though?
We can track it also by iLearn because, of course, we know which students have access to this. We have been, because we don't have, I should say, in addition to using iLearn data, because of course we know which students access this, and we will be able to determine their iLearn pass rate and how that compares to the rest of their school. What we also have in addition to that are pre and post screeners that should be a more accurate indicator of the effectiveness of what was learned during that time.
Screening students before they start tutoring and after they start tutoring?
Yes.
Okay. And will we be able to see the results for the different types, the virtual versus the university partners, different schools? Okay. How some of the decisions you're making around, I'm looking at Well, this slide too is good too. Around for whom and by whom and when and on what. Who makes those decisions? Are those made at the school level or are those made at the district level?
Currently, those are being made at the district level. So we have grounded this in the best research on what makes high dosage tutoring effective. We're trying to be, this is a very well studied actually area of academic intervention. So we have used that research to try to set pretty rigid guidelines around what we know it takes to be effective.
Why not at the school level, though? I would think though principals and teachers would know best how to serve their students and what they're interested in, which students, and why not at the school level?
So some of those decisions you're describing do happen at the school level. So if let's just be more granular about this. So for whom, for example, we are setting some recommendations around this. Like we know we want to be prioritizing students who have performed lower on iLearn. We also know we're trying to track and focus on early literacy because that's a place where we see in our district data needing to focus energy. But in terms of the actual which students, like when we were actually in a classroom, so just this week at Clarence Farrington and Ralph Waldo Emerson, when we're in a classroom and making those tutoring groups, teachers and principals are very involved in that process and saying, who do we need to be serving? So I guess I'm amending my answer. You'll see a lot of these decisions in practice end up being made jointly, but of course those guidelines around what we're holding tight on, that is based on the research, and those are things that we are less flexible on.
What about as far as whether you do it virtual or you partner with someone? Do schools choose that or makes those decisions?
So we haven't made those decisions yet. So that will be made in a combination of internal decision making with the central team and then also with schools, because we have not yet decided exactly how we're going to organize that for the fall.
But for the pilot, schools have had the opportunity to choose which method.
They choose which method they use.
In some cases, yes. In other cases, we have just recommended, hey, this is an opportunity we can stand up for you right now. Do you want to take it? They of course have to be bought in, but we have come to schools with very specific models to say, this is an opportunity we can provide for you right now. Your data indicates you need it. Would you like to work with us to make this happen?
The schools choose the students, well, provided the students are willing. Schools choose the partner or virtual. Schools choose whether or not they want to opt in, right? District chooses the curriculum or the subject matter.
Yes, but of course we're shaping, I guess I'm more hesitant than I should be, because of course we're shaping the path, right? We are actively encouraging our emerging schools to be part of this. We are actively thinking about which schools already have a lot of other initiatives on their plate and this might not be a good fit for. So we are helping shape that path while also giving appropriate choice to ensure that this is organized in the best interest of their students.
Okay.
One thing I would also add to what Sarah just mentioned is when we were actually looking at the design for tutoring and thinking about will we just give money to schools or think about how schools would just design this, one of the things we heard from schools was just the lift of who would actually staff tutoring and how they would actually run these programs. So a lot of this work are really trying to fine-tuning some of the different programs, providing some different options, was really in response to schools saying, we know we need this, our students really want this, but we don't have the capacity to run this, or we don't know the staff who's going to do that. And so that was something I know we had mentioned earlier on, but I wanted to add that in addition to what we found for Sarah, what Sarah mentioned, because that was also a challenge of just saying who is going to run it and how will we do this at scale for all schools.
Thank you. Last question is, when it comes to racial equity, how are you including racial equity in your decisions?
Yeah, it's an excellent question. So when we are focusing on our emerging schools, which again is really where we are, when I say we're shaping the path, we've really put a lot of our energy in making sure our emerging schools are participating in this. That is a racial equity play. The work we are doing around supporting our emerging schools to ensure they are performing at high levels, that's baked into our strategic plan under that racial equity priority. So I would say that's the first thing, is like the whole decision around which schools we're prioritizing, which schools we're supporting, that's really about that racial equity play. I think second of all, learning how to do tutoring in multiple modalities, that is part of tracking towards a racial equity play as well for us. Because we know that when folks are available, how difficult it is to get to a tutoring location or to stay after school or be there before school. All of that has racial equity implications in making sure we are piloting how to design these programs in multiple modalities so that as many families as possible can access them. That is part of our racial equity play as well.
So you're taking all of that in mind, not just the school decision, but you're also taking some of those other factors into consideration.
Absolutely.
As far as like when you select students too, that's all come into play?
Yeah, absolutely. And of course, that is then, the part of the data we're looking at is our NWEA data. That is all rooted in our goal of closing the gap in terms of the performance that we're seeing with our students of color and NWEA. All of that flows into how are we organizing our resources to drive towards racial equity in our academic outcomes.
Are you tracking the racial makeup of everyone who's participating?
Yeah, all this is tracked in PowerSchool. So we know exactly which students are accessing tutoring. Any data that you want on one of our students, we can track them in our tutoring program and then be able to report back, is this effective towards our goal for racial equity or not?
I know we're a ways away from reporting on the academic effectiveness, but when we come back and we look at that too, I'd also like to see that racial breakdown of who was actually impacted by the program.
Absolutely. Because we know that impacts our board goals, and that is just what we value as a district.
Okay. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Pritchard. Great questions. Commissioner Slack.
Thank you, Sarah. I appreciate this work. Thank you, Dr. Morgan. I appreciate this work. I like how intentional all of this is and how it's driven by intentionality and the data. I like the fact that it prioritizes our early literacy and emerging schools. I can go step by step. Adding 2 more schools on board on slide 12. I mean, the intentionally driven by using the data. And this is what I've always wanted us to be, is more proactive with our strategy. And I feel like that with this design in motion, we're doing just that. I did want to ask a couple clarifying questions. I seen that IEPUI in Marion was going to be the in-person staff that was chosen, which I like. I think it's driven by teachers that are already there, but are we using the teachers that are there for, I know there are teachers that go in to our schools and they are there to be teachers, but they're also in their program as well. Are we using these teachers, taking them away from learning programs and using them for tutoring? Because then that would be, I would be concerned with that, because I don't want them just to be doing just tutoring for our kids, but I also, as a wife of an educator, want them to be learning what they're going to be doing every day in class. So is that something that we're doing?
No, it's an excellent question. I will have more information for you all on, so just in full transparency, we are currently in conversation specifically with IUPUI around what is it going to look like to support them to re-envision their program and scale even components of their program, we're hoping, in an intentional way that serves our students coming this fall. So I will have more information for you on how we are approaching that. We are absolutely approaching this from the lens of what does this mean for the long-term vision of our city in terms of promoting the well-being of a great pipeline of teachers for our community while also serving this immediate need for our students with tutoring.
Awesome. That's amazing. I did want to say, I do want to thank with the equity hat when we talk about what schools can go ahead and get this tutoring elsewhere and what schools can't afford the tutoring. And I did like to see the data, though. I like to see families that want to opt in. If you ask a person if they want to do something versus telling them they have to do something, you're probably going to get a better response. So I like that. I like that data that I seen on slide 14. So with all that in summary, keep doing what you're doing. Please keep us updated on the academic effectiveness, because that is what's driving our board goals, but kudos.
Thank you so much.
Thank you, Commissioner Slack. Commissioners, any additional questions? Sarah, thank you for the presentation, and Dr. Morgan and team. I think, this, you said, you used the word scale, right? And this is a significant scaling of an enterprise here to be able to deliver, which rooted in academic effectiveness and attendance, right? I mean, that's ultimately the fundamental to drive outcomes, right? So I want to acknowledge that this is a big lift. It's incredibly important. I think what you're detecting from commissioners here is just that, I think we all feel that as Ms. Bond articulated back in March of 2020, that we've been at this for a while, and so I want to acknowledge it. I think this isn't criticism. This is simply just a feeling of a sense of urgency on behalf of our young people and kids and educators to really fill in the gaps where the gaps we know are needed. So I just want to acknowledge that. My two questions, one is really related to, and you mentioned, quite a bit of research has been done. So I'm curious about the market in general. And so what are you seeing in Marion County, Indiana, nationally? Are we seeing this type of approach? I know that we have a little bit of a kind of a two-legged monster here. We have the virtual remote piece, and then we also have the in-person dynamics. I'm curious what is the market doing in response to, we know the tutoring need that's necessary for learning acceleration. So that's the first question. The second question is really around how all this connects to the summer and how do you bridge between spring and fall? So my two questions.
You want to answer your questions in reverse order. So in terms of how this connects to the summer, as you know, we have a pretty robust summer school program that we are in the process of standing up right now, which is also going to be funded by ESSER dollars. And one of the things that we've actually, as we think about this tutoring work, we've had families ask us whether or not they can continue to access online tutoring during the summer, which of course raises a new set of challenges for us, but is also really exciting because it means that families are bought in. Families do want to be able to access this. So one thing that we have asked Tutored by Teachers to do for us is to actually build out a project plan that would help illustrate exactly how this fits into our summer school strategy. So we don't want online tutoring to take the place of accessing some of the great summer programming that we and many other community partners are standing up this summer. What we want is to think about how does this sit alongside our summer strategy and who are the families that this would be right for? Is it families who are out of town a lot or go spend the summer somewhere else, or families where they don't actually need childcare, they want to spend time as a family, but they need that additional academic support? So we're right now getting a proposal from Tutored by Teachers for exactly how we would fit that online tutoring support in alongside the strategies that we are employing for summer school. So that's answer one. Second, I just think it's such an interesting question around what is everyone doing, because nationally, everyone is trying to stand up their own tutoring programs. I will tell you anecdotally, I was told by someone who is an expert in this field that they think Indianapolis actually might be the first urban school district to stand up tutoring at a large scale with ESSER dollars. So that's kind of cool. But I don't know what else we're necessarily seeing specifically across Indianapolis in terms of where other people are standing up programming. I know several of our out of LEA charter partners have stood up programming, again, using a lot of those contractors that are available, many of which we have vetted. One of our big learnings so far, though, has been we really want to make sure we are deliberate and targeted and limited in who our partners are, because more partners just creates more complexity, especially when it comes to that data piece of like collecting rigorous data on who is attending, what are the academic outcomes. So even as we're seeing that market continue to evolve in central Indiana, I think we're going to keep an eye on those other options, but we are still trying to be very targeted and limited in our approach for who are the partners we're willing to take on.
Yeah, no, I appreciate that answer, because excuse me, many of the headlines or articles that I read around, reflecting on how school systems and operators are thinking about, tutoring, it feels like in some cases that there's just a lot of throwing at the wall. And there isn't to your point, scaling and being very intentional and course correction and continuous improvement being a value of IPS, right? Mm-hmm. That very thoughtful process. So I want to thank you and the team for the direction you mentioned. We're going in a direction, and it's incredibly complex to stand up something like this at this scale. And so we appreciate, certainly I think as a board, we appreciate your intentionality and also receiving the feedback that we want to move as fast as possible, but I think we want to move quickly but not rush, because you can rush, you can break some things, right? And so, again, appreciate your work and the team's work as you build this, what we hope to be a very sustainable tutoring program. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
Thanks so much, Sarah, for all the work that's happening around our tutoring. We are, go slow to go fast. So we want to get it right and then scale it and scale the right things. Our next item and last superintendent report is our quarterly finance report. And so I will turn it over to Weston Young, our Chief Financial Officer, to bring us home in superintendent reports.
Thank you, Dr. Johnson. Good evening, commissioners. Tonight's Q3 finance update. Typical sections that we'll be highlighting. Just want to highlight there's a link there for financial reports if you want to learn more about the financial landscape of IPS. Slide highlighting some of the budget plans and execution of our strategy for this school year. the continued shift to one-to-one technology, our social distancing, our focus on literacy, and then also our community conversations, primarily around the strategic plan and also our Rebuilding Stronger priorities. I want to highlight on the federal side a couple updates. One is you heard from Dina on the food service update, which is a great update. What you noted there is that there were some revenues this year that were received, one from the USDA, and then also ESSER, there was an ESSER play that helped the revenue and cash balance of that food service fund. Going forward, obviously, she mentioned some inflationary costs on food. We'll highlight a little bit of that later, but also the revenues are still lagging. So going forward, even though this year we're about a break even, future years we're looking still about $4 million deficit in the food service fund. We have cash, but over time, if that is not right-sized, it will eventually hit our operations fund or some other funding source. The second item under federal funding I want to highlight is that we've talked a lot about the impact of COVID, and if you remember, right off the bat, we were capturing the costs of our response for COVID. Well, I'm here to report that we have been approved temporarily for a FEMA distribution of about $580,000. So we were calculating all these and compiling all these expenses. Many of those are being funded by ESSER, but we have put in the time. We have a determination where $580,000 of our PPE will be reimbursed through FEMA. So that's an update on the federal funding. On the local funding, we have a couple updates there. We're going to highlight a little bit of our impact of inflation, the cost of our goods and services. We'll provide an update on debt issuance of $46 million we did, and then also continue to highlight the financial reporting that we have available, but also the audit, which was highlighted in the audit committee report, which we hope to finalize in May. Year-to-date, 9 months, year-to-date cash flow. Really want to highlight the couple things here. The operating referendum revenue still supports a great deal our operating budget. This is a 3-month time frame where we do not receive the property taxes, so therefore there's this negative net cash flow of about $40 million. Right now in the bank, about $58 million, really with about 15%, which is related to our fund balance. It's in compliance with that. When we look at the year-to-date spending, we're above last year, but less than the budgeted amounts. A couple of the highlights here is that the transportation capital projects are really about timing of the payments, with us being cash basis. We project transportation to be a little bit above budget when it's all said and done, and capital projects on budget. When it comes to the educational piece of our expenditures, we see the increase in innovation payments, mainly because of the budgeted amount being one that did not include some of the innovation schools that were brought online and approved following the budget. So that's one of the main reasons for the increase. Additionally, there is the operating referendum funds that were shared in December pursuant to the agreed upon resolution in November of 2021. Our supply diversity, first 3 months reported of our calendar year, we report this on a calendar year basis, so this is first 3 months. You'll see about 8% this year, 7% last year in that 3-month period. We see opportunities here to be strategically pursuing our relationships with diverse suppliers, mainly through our construction work that we're going to be kicking off with a lot of the bond issuance that we've done. Also noted here is that we've increased the number of XPE vendors used from 42 to 60 during that 3-month period from last year to this year. We have our all funds cash flow, really highlighting this at this point where we have an additional revenue line called ESSER. You'll see that with all the spend and all the activity we've done, we have about $8 million actually received from the IDOE for the activity we've had in response to COVID, and then also the negative all funds cash flow being mainly because of the property taxes not being received during this quarter. We have our cash, about $127 million in the bank for all the funds. We issued bonds and we received about $46 million in bonds in April. So therefore, if you were to see this, there's probably about another $46 million in there related to the construction bonds. When we look at the full year cash flow projected by the end of the school year, this is similar to what we presented in the budget appropriation hearings, about 25% fund balance at the end of the year. As far as budget update, highlighted the $46 million that we issued in bonds. You can see some of the financing details. Average interest rate about 2.5%. Last payment in 27. We were supported by Stifel and Loop, an MBE underwriter, our municipal financial advisor, Baker Tilly, and our bond counsel, Ice Miller. You can see the list of the project details that we highlighted in public hearings and multiple times with the board. Many schools represented in that investment. Charter innovation partners and direct managed alike, high school, elementary school. Just a lot of activity going to be happening in our schools. One reason we went for the bond at the time is because of the interest rates raising throughout the rest of the year that we projected. And so we're glad to have received a very, very positive result from that issuance. When we talk about inflation, this is something we've highlighted in the past, but this is something that continues to be an impact, not just on IPS, but on our families. The families are experiencing increases in food, in energy, and housing costs. And so this is something that as families, they're managing it, but also as a district, we're having to manage it. This is showing inflation, averages 2.5%. This is inflation that hasn't been seen since the early 80s. Since 1981, it's not been that high. So that's 2 generations almost where we're experiencing inflation at these rates. So where is it impacting IPS? Our food service director, Dina, shared how it's impacting food service and how she and her team are addressing that. They're listed there. Energy, natural gas, we're projecting about 12% increase. Electricity, about 4% increase. Diesel, the heating and cooling and empowering of our operations is impacted by the energy costs. How are we doing that? We've continued to highlight our synergistic partnership over the years with great success there. Energy Star building initiatives, I think a couple months ago or last month, we highlighted, I think, 9 schools that were deemed Energy Star status. We have building automation control investments, again, highlighted in some of the ESSER investments and also the bonds that we issued, and then also some of the strategic sourcing. Also in construction, we're looking at 30% increase on cost of construction. So how are we looking at that when we try to design and use the materials and procure the materials? We're also looking at getting into the market with interest rates and the debt at an earlier time when we know interest rates may be rising. So again, we're executing those bonds. We're doing reimbursement resolutions to spend related to those bonds. And then we're also having to adjust project timelines. And then strategic sourcing is a key part of that. Why do we bring that up? Because at some point we talk about student-based allocation, we talk about driving dollars to the classroom, but on an annual basis, we really don't have an opportunity to increase revenue. We aren't one that, okay, we're going to mark up our costs. We do that, pretty much every 2 years with the budget that's passed by the state. That's our opportunity to see what our revenue is and work within those means. So without additional revenue sources, every dollar spent on food, energy, and construction is a dollar we can't spend in the classroom. It's a dollar that is spent and gone. So we have to make additional shifts in our operations and make critical decisions. And speaking of decisions, this is the slide we highlight many times, but those 2 words on the left, decision points, we're coming up to some really key decision points. We've highlighted the Rebuilding Stronger Committee, the meetings that we've had, the planning, the conversation, the input. We're also had our budget conversation the last few months, and we've aligned on that, and we're aligning that for next school year. We're also looking at just really key critical part of our transportation, scaling some of the transportation initiatives that are having some success in lowering some costs, but we've got to do better on the transportation piece. So we're looking at scaling transportation initiatives for next school year. Again, as we talk about the Rebuilding Stronger and many of the decision points, early continuous intervention and on those decisions will help us stabilize the financial outlook. We're looking for that purple line that has dollars above zero in our cash balance every year at the end of the year. So where are we today? lot happening on the slide, but we want to highlight the green box, which is the last few years where we've had this slide presented, and each year we've been able to stabilize that cash balance. So that's what's highlighted early on in that green section, but also see that in that green section, we have some years here we still have an opportunity to make decisions in time for a couple cliffs. We had Sarah highlight the ESSER project, and she did a great job of highlighting the sustainability question and concerns. ESSER is not going to deliver on that. ESSER is one-time funding, and we highlight where that ESSER funding stops. And then also, we have a reliance on the operating referendum at this point to cover our costs. And that operating referendum ends in the end of calendar year 26. So this is the current cash flow projection for our district. So key messages here, highlighted some of the bond projects and the issuance of that, the $46 million for the building improvements and technology in our schools. We've highlighted how we're trying to manage some of the inflationary costs and how we do that to sustain our operations. And then also we've highlighted throughout the evening our Rebuilding Stronger campaign and just the need for long-term sustainability to be continually evaluated, and also just looking at the decisions that are upon us to sustain the work. At this time, have any questions?
Weston, thank you again for the quarterly financial update. Commissioners, any specific questions for Mr. Young? Commissioner Pritchard.
Okay, thank you, Weston. Making my way through these appendices, very extensive. A lot of good information here. Can you remind me at least again, why did we see a decrease in the Title I funding? What is that aligned with?
Yeah, Title I is impacted by the census data rather than the population we serve. And so the census data is showing that the kids ages 5 to 17 in the IPS boundary do not qualify due to income levels as they have in the past. And so that's the main driver, and that will continue, I believe, as we look at heat maps and property values and demographic shifts. That's something that not just us, but charters and a lot of the families that are impacted by that Title I shift. That's the main reason why.
It has nothing to do with the IPS student population at all.
They're in that census data primarily,
yeah,
but
right.
primarily it's a census data figure.
Okay. And then the second question, I know in the last couple of months we've approved some bond issuances, and now rates are going up. Are those rates locked? Are we on schedule with closing those before we see any rate increases?
Yeah, good question. So the rates are locked. The 2.5% on the $46 million is what we're going to pay. The funds have been received. As of last Thursday, we received the $46 million into our bank account.
Thank you.
But what is not locked is the inflation associated with the project expense, as you noted, the varying inflation rates associated with mechanical systems, exterior envelope, glass, roofs, et cetera. So, yeah, Commissioner Slack.
Thank you, Weston, for this work. So the highlight of slide 11 is really highlighting some of our old buildings, and when you're dealing with energy costs and things of that nature as well. Is that also depicted into this chart on slide 11?
The inflationary.
I know you talked about in the next slide, in slide 12, like natural gas, electricity, and things of that nature. But is that also depicted in that slide as well? The buildings that we are currently operating?
Yeah, I think if we have older buildings, I think Scott and Paul can probably tell you that the chillers and HVAC units probably aren't as efficient as maybe something that would be new. The windows, the sealants, everything about the roof is probably an older quality, and so the investments that we make on a year-to-year basis with a significant investment across our district, that would long-term, I think, improve the energy consumption experience of our buildings.
All right, I just want to emphasize to our community so they understand our capital improvements and things that we're doing. Could you also speak more about the development process that you're talking about in slide 13 when you're talking about transportation? I think I need a little more clarification when you're talking about scaling transportation. What do you mean by that?
Yeah, so we've continually done a lot of work on routing, so making sure that we have optimized our routes. We've also last year, and this school year, had an increase in our walk zones and utilized crossing guards. That's a main driver of the savings for us. I think the team right now is looking at the number of drivers and number of routes and making sure that we optimize the routes for the students that need served for next school year, that we work within the means that we have.
Are we talking about maybe having to do more walk zones, or are we talking about maybe having to increase kids going on Indigo, or do we know where we may be landing on that? Maybe Zach can help us out with that. Do we know where we're going to land on that side?
I think there's always opportunity to engage with Indigo, and I think there's some good involvement we've had there with almost about 800, 900 kids that have been operating off of Indigo this year. That's something that we will continue to push out and try to engage with families. I don't know if Zach, you'd want to highlight anything else on the transportation front?
Yeah, just with the question with respect to walk zones. So there's no sense of reviewing those or changing the walk boundaries that we did, the work that we did last year. Primarily, we're focused on, again, continuing to look at the Indigo partnership, opportunities to build on what I think was a successful kind of year one implementation of that. So looking for opportunities to scale and build on that success. And then, as Weston said, continuing our work with just route optimization. So how can we make sure that our buses are running as efficiently as possible without really disrupting kids? So one of the largest focus of this going into next school year, we'll be looking at kind of a stop consolidation work, how we can better optimize the location and density of our bus stops to squeeze out some additional efficiencies. So those are the two primary drivers that we're looking at for next school year.
Thank you, guys. I appreciate it.
Thank you, Commissioner Slack. Commissioner Collins.
Yes, thank you, Weston. Always lots of information, and it's always good. I'm wondering if there's ever been an analysis or a study done on using solar or installing solar in some of our buildings, either as an experiment or as a viable alternative to petroleum.
Zach, do you want to take that one as well?
Zach probably is the best to answer that.
Yeah, that's probably, yeah.
Yeah, so we've actually engaged, we have an MOU with a group that is doing a feasibility analysis with IPS right now. So we actually have, I think Weston, Scott, and Paul and I have a meeting tomorrow, a 2-hour meeting as a follow-up on that to evaluate. So we're looking at some kind of solar as a service model for some of our schools. So looking at both ground and rooftop arrays. And so working through that analysis now to see what's possible, what's feasible. We do kind of have a tight timeline. There are some changes in Indiana law with respect to net metering that we need to, that we're kind of up against. So we hope to complete that feasibility analysis in the next few weeks and have a sense of what opportunities might exist. And then there's some conversations we need to have with our utility service provider, AES, about tariff rates and so forth to make sure that works. But we have a team that's working and evaluating that right now.
Is the net metering has improved, hasn't it? I mean, that whole concept has been more favorable to people, to consumers. Is that correct?
There were some changes to the law that go into effect beginning July 1 of 2022 that begin to phase out some of the retail rates in terms of, so I would say it's less favorable in terms of putting excess charge back onto the grid in terms of what the credit essentially that you get for that. So that's the change that we're sort of up against in terms of applications get in. You can lock in under the previous net metering rate. So I think in that sense the legislative changes have been not favorable in terms of that. And so that's one of the things we're looking at with respect to these plans.
Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Collins. Commissioners, any additional questions for Weston and the team? right, thank you for the update.
Thanks so much, Weston. Moving us along, there are no items in unfinished business, and there are 6 items in new business, which were all reviewed on Tuesday evening. Item 8.01 was the administration's update on a number of innovation agreements, including innovation agreement renewals for Avondale Meadows Middle School and Purdue Polytechnic High School at Inglewood, and 2 new innovation partnership agreements with Monarca Academy and Purdue Polytechnic High School North. I believe we have some public comment on both of these items.
Thank you. Thank you, Dr. Johnson. Before the administration presents on this item, having just presented on this item, we'd like to welcome public comment for those individuals who signed up to speak to these specific items. I will remind our speakers that you are allowed 3 minutes to offer your comments to the board. A timer will start when you begin, and I ask that you briefly conclude your remarks when the buzzer goes off. Please come to the podium and begin your comments when your name is called. Mr. Brunlor, would you please call the first speaker to the podium?
Brandeis McNeil. Brandeis McNeil. Chio Mofrika. Chio Mofrika. Guadalupe Kelly. On deck is Maria Preston.
Hi, good evening. IPS Board and Dr. Alicia Johnson, thank you for listening to my comments today. My name is Guadalupe Kelly, and I've been in this community for almost over the 25 years. And I am a president for the Mexican Women Association here in Indiana. And today I support Monarca Academic. I had the opportunity to listen to Elia and Francisco about Monarca Academic. I'm supporting Monarca Academic because I know the children will be there, and I'm happy to place like Monarca will increase the sense of belongings to the every child to attend. I urge you to vote in favor to Monarca Academic, and thanks again.
Maria Preston. On deck is Inés Paez.
Good evening. Thank you, IPS Board and Dr. Johns. Thank you for listening to my comments tonight. My name is Maria Preston. I'm a member of this community for 25 years. As a previous IPS student, I grew up in this community, like I said, and I had to navigate and learn to manage a challenging system within the IPS school system. My mother, Guadalupe Kelly, and I have worked in the public health field for many years. Actually, I started very young, fresh out of high school as a volunteer. And through the years, I keep listening to the challenges that families are facing on top of dealing with some cultural shock. We have to add learning to navigate that new system, and how parents sometimes want to actively be engaged in the education of their children, but they don't know the system. They don't know how to participate. Our children also struggle. They struggle to become part of that community. And I believe that Monarca Academy is going to be an option for children that are going to strive in a different environment. A system that is probably going to be a good opportunity for parents to be actively engaged with their children, their education, which I feel is crucial for the success of our children. When parents are involved, it's a lot easier for them to learn how to support their children. A lot of times they don't know what struggles they're having in school. They don't know. I had the opportunity to listen to that new pilot program for tutoring. If you offer it to a child, they're not going to go tell their mom, oh, hey, there's this option. So when there is a break in communication, parents don't know about these options. So I believe that Monarca Academy is going to be able to communicate better with the parents, explain to them the system and what options their children have. So I ask you and I urge you to support Monarca Academy, vote in their favor tonight, and welcome them into our community. Thank you for your time.
Inés Paez. On deck is Eva Zuniga.
Good night, everybody. It's a pleasure to me to be here. I, Inés Páez, from SATCO. SATCO is Colombian Friends Association. Our target is to help students go to the college. Para mí es realmente muy agradable apoyar a una escuela como Monarca Academy, porque ustedes han pensado lo difícil que es que una familia llegue a este país, sus padres y sus hijos no hablen el idioma y todo sea diferente.
It's pleasant to be here and it's pleasant to support a school like Monarca Academy. It is very difficult for a family who has just arrived to learn everything about the system and everything that is so new. It is a challenge.
Es muy difícil para una familia migrante llegar a un país donde ni los papás ni los hijos hablan el idioma.
It's hard for a family who's neither the parents nor the children speak the language.
Y también es muy difícil que hemos sido educados, por ejemplo, en un sistema como el sistema métrico decimal, donde todo lo hablamos en centímetros, en kilómetros, y aquí son pulgadas, inches.
It's difficult for us when we're also educated in a different metric system, where we're taught about inches instead of what we're taught.
Y es una de las razones por qué apoyamos a Monarca Academy, porque su director es migrante y las escuelas públicas, aunque son excelentes,
and that's why we support Monarca Academy. We support a director who is an immigrant.
Las escuelas públicas son excelentes, pero nuestros hijos pasan a ser un número más.
Public schools are excellent, however, our children are just seen as just a number.
En Monarca Academy hace menos traumático la transición del estudiante que viene a este país.
It would be less traumatic for somebody who's just arriving in this country to attend Monarca Academy.
Y también reduce la deserción de los estudiantes para ir a la universidad.
It also increases the ability for the children to attend the university or college.
Go to college. Because they had more support, personally support. Muchas gracias. Me encanta haber estado con ustedes.
I'm glad to be here. Thank you.
Eva Zuniga. On deck is Jamia Liggins-Fisher.
I'm sorry, this is Virginia Vizcana Ortega taking the place of Eva, who was not able to be here today.
Muy buenas noches, directores.
Good evening, directors.
Gracias por escucharnos hoy.
Thank you for listening to us today.
Soy voluntaria en la comunidad y estoy aquí como madre y abuela.
I'm here I am a volunteer in the community, and I'm here as a mother and a grandmother.
Para pedirles un voto en favor de la escuela Monarca.
I'm here to request a favorable vote for Monarca.
Nuestra comunidad está muy emocionada que pronto comenzará la escuela.
Our community is very excited that the school will begin soon.
Es importante que personas como el señor Francisco sean líderes en las escuelas.
It's important that people like Francisco be leaders in our schools.
Se han dicho que no puede ser lo que no puede ser o lo que no puede ver. Gracias. Buenas noches.
It is said that you can't be what you can't see. Thank you very much.
Jamia Liggins-Fisher.
Good evening, Superintendent Dr. Johnson and Commissioners.
Racial equity is too often seen in terms of black and white. Real equity means everyone has space to be affirmed and celebrated. And that means recognizing Latino students as well. Monarca Academy will provide a necessary space for Indy's Latino students. Having culturally affirming schools for Black students in Indy has been game-changing. Our Latino brothers and sisters deserve the same. I want to be able to brag about Indianapolis being a place where every student gets exceptional education. That isn't true yet for too many Black and brown students. Monarca Academy will help to correct that. I know that every student who is empowered with a transformative education will only make Indianapolis a better place to live and work. Monarca Academy has my full support as a school that I am confident will educate all its students with excellence. Thank you.
So is my understanding Brandice McNeil and Chio Mafrika were going to speak on behalf of Purdue Polytechnic North. Are there other individuals who have signed up to speak on Purdue Polytechnic North that still would like to speak this evening? You would state your name. Thank you.
Sure. My name is Candy Kingma, and my granddaughter Kay Piper is a freshman at Purdue Polytechnic North. We chose PPHS because of the small class size, individualized and innovative teaching. They allow the students to think outside of the box by learning outside of the box and by learning outside of the traditional classroom. For example, although Kay was not in this particular class, many of her friends were. Last session, they had a combined biology, math, and language arts class where they grew plants for the biology component. They tracked the growth of the plants and other statistics about the plants and made charts and graphs as the math component. And then they wrote reports for their language arts component. The kids enjoyed it and learned required curriculum in an unusual way, but in a real world setting. We're staying at PPHS because they empower our students to have both a voice and a choice to discover their passion, follow their interests, and pursue their own goals. The school is preparing Kay for her future college education and work life. The coaches work closely with the students, and they're given individualized guidance throughout high school to prepare to successfully apply to college in their given fields. Kay has the opportunity for frequent contact with Purdue, including taking a class this summer on campus, taking Purdue classes concurrently with her high school education, and participating with Purdue students on passion projects. The use of Broad Ripple High School would be beneficial to the students because it would bring them all together as a community, and that they don't have right now. The freshmen and sophomores are in one building, 7 blocks away, the juniors and seniors. The students and coaches have to walk or ride between those 2 buildings frequently during the day. And because the teachers, as well as the coaches, as well as the students have classes, both buildings. And this happens in all kinds of weather, including when the sidewalks are impassable during the winter. I'm here to ask you to please consider allowing PPHS to use a portion of Broad Ripple High School to create a more collaborative community for the students so they can continue to learn and grow into their potential. Thank you.
And if you'd please state your name, ma'am.
Yes, Rochelle McDaniels. I also have a student there at Broad Ripple, Purdue Polytechnic High School, and the teachers and the coaches there are doing an awesome job encouraging the students to dream big and to delve into their futures and go to college and get a good education so that they can live a healthy, happy life. However, the current building that they are in was a former office space, which is not conducive for a learning environment. Instead of being in a classroom, they're in someone's old office. Some classes cannot be conducted in the building, like some of the extracurricular activities. They have some been eliminated because there's not enough space to conduct those types of activities. Also, there's a lack of parking, so they cannot have any sports events and different things at the school. Those have to be held at different facilities. There's a basement space there that has been used and is currently being used for several different things because they do not have enough space to have individual activities conducted throughout the school. And also with the students being separate in two different buildings, they don't have the real high school experience because of the way the building is constructed. And with it being too small, it does not fit the needs of the students or the staff. In moving our students to a portion of the Broad Ripple High School building that would encourage and engage them and lift them. And my thought is, if we can help lift these future doctors and these future engineers and these students and give them a little bit of encouragement, why would we not do that? Thank you.
Thank you to our public speakers, or commenters. We appreciate that, and thank you, Mr. Bernlohr. Commissioners, my request is that perhaps we cluster these votes or these recommendations if that's appropriate. So my thinking is that just want to make sure we're comfortable with this, that we would cluster the Purdue Poly and Monarca recommendations separate from the renewals of the other Purdue Poly location and Avondale Meadows. Is there comfort with that, or do we want to decouple those and take individual votes? I want to make sure that we're comfortable with that approach or not. Okay. Yeah. And the other one is prior to as I entertain a motion, perhaps a first or a second. Commissioners, if you feel so inclined to offer any rationale, feedback, remarks associated with your vote, would like to do that during or after that first or second motion during further discussion, if that makes sense. However, before we get to that, if there are any specific questions, I do want to open up the floor to you for any specific questions for the administration, whether it be Dr. Johnson or Jamie or any others, before we move forward with the entertaining of the motions. Commissioner Arnold.
I just have a question for Purdue Polytech. Maybe Scott could answer this related to, and I asked this question last night, the student population, like 27% was within the district and the rest was out, and you explained, but I think it would help if everybody got that explanation.
Yeah. Yes, ma'am. Again, thank you to the commissioners and allowing me to be here. Thanks to everybody else. And again, side note, really great job on Rebuilding Stronger. Pleased to be a member of that committee. And it's an awesome job, really great job involving in the community. So thank you. Yeah, on that slide, it was a little bit confusing. The 27% were students who actually attended an IPS school last year or before they came to us. We actually have about 50% of our students who come from the IPS district. Some of those students go to charter schools, private schools, or homeschool, but they live in the district. Some of those students didn't attend an IPS school. So the 27% were students who actually attended an IPS school before they came to us.
And then you also talked about that a percentage of your students come from North Central area and come because they want a smaller school experience than they would get at North Central. And I know we lose students to North Central, so for me, it's kind of a way to get those back. Do you want to?
Yeah, that's right. Yeah, obviously with the proximity to Washington Township in general and in North Central's schools, we do get quite a few students. That's our most popular township in terms of people who are coming to us from other places. We get some from Lawrence Township as well, but Washington Township is by far the largest township that we're getting students from, mainly because of the proximity and the transportation.
Thank you for that clarification.
Thank you, Commissioner Arnold. Commissioners, any additional questions for Commissioner Pritchard?
I have a question. I know we've had a couple of presentations from Monarca, so apologize for asking this so late in the game, but maybe this is better answered for the Monarca team. But was there ever any thought about a language immersion program at Monarca?
I'm sorry. Good evening, Commissioners. What was the question again?
Yeah.
I'm sorry.
No, that's fine. Sorry to ask it so late in the game because I know you've been here before. But what were you during this creation of your school? Was there ever any thought given to creating a dual language immersion program as part of the school?
In looking at the environment and seeing that there are a lot of dual immersion programs already, we realized that that was something that we didn't want to try to replicate. We wanted to be a unique program. We do have a robust Spanish program that we're putting together that will enable students that come from dual language immersion programs to be able to on-ramp to the program, to our Spanish program, but also students who speak no Spanish whatsoever to be able to also become bilingual by the time they graduate at Monarca Academy.
Thank you.
Commissioner Slack.
Yes, with all the discussion with Monarca and PPHS, I kind of looked over the Avondale a little bit, and I want to had a couple clarifying questions before. And I did look at the appendix, and it seems like that on 50, it said a decline in enrollment, and then 51 said a decline in attendance, and then staff retention as well on all three of those slides. Is that what I'm reading?
Just to make sure I'm tracking. So slide 50, yes, where the enrollment had decreased from 1819 to 1920 and then kind of flat 2021. Slide 51, attendance. I think on that particular one, it seems to follow the trend of IPS relative to the COVID, and so similar to what we would expect. And then you're also asking about slide 52, you said staff retention?
Yes.
Okay. Well, I know a member of their team is here, so I would actually invite Kelly Heron to come up, or anyone else that she has with her, in order to speak to those data specifics. Kelly, do you need the slides? Would it be helpful? Okay.
Good evening. I'm Kelly Heron. I'm the executive director at Avenel Meadows Middle School. That is correct, and those declines are staffing retention is the one. We had 71% staff retention coming into this year of our total staff. However, we had 92% retention of our effective staff. So that's something that we look at. We look at retention of everyone, retention of teachers, and then retention of those who are effective. And we feel like that is a much better indicator than just all of our staff.
Say executive staff?
Effective.
Oh, effective.
Effective, sorry.
I'm sorry.
Okay, that clarifies a little bit more. And you didn't come into, creation until 2018. Is that what I'm seeing?
2017.
17, 18 years.
It's our first year.
Okay, so you've been there approximately about 3 years?
This is our 5th year of operation.
5th year. And have you been the principal the entire time?
Crystal Westerhouse is our principal. She has been here all 5 years. She's our founding principal. I'm the executive director of our network of schools. Okay. I was the principal of our elementary school, and then when we opened the middle school, we created a network support team for both the schools.
And you said she's been there all 5 years?
She has, yes, and she's returning next year into our 6th year.
Thank you very much.
No problem.
Thank you for the questions, Commissioner Slack. Commissioner Arnold.
I have a question for Avondale. Since you're here, I thought we were taking them. Looking at the data and seeing that your performance, the performance of your students is better than the district or our district middle schools, but it's not what I would call stellar, and I'm sure it's not what you would call stellar. Can you just share a little bit of what your plan for improving the academic
Absolutely.
measurement going forward?
So you are correct. Our data is not where we want it to be at all. We've set ambitious goals, coming into this year of doubling our proficiency rate in both ELA and math. One of our big focus areas for this year is codifying our instructional systems for our Tier 2 and Tier 3 students. That's actually not just our instructional systems, but our SEL systems for those students. We feel like we have really good Tier 1 systems in place, but then what about the students that those don't work for? So making sure that we have, the interventions taking place during the school day, both academically and behaviorally for all students, as well as after school with our tutoring program, and just continuing to work to develop our teachers, especially during a time of, teacher shortage, and we all are working with what we have, but making sure that we're providing a lot of support for them, giving them constant feedback that's aligned to our instructional vision, and then providing the development along the way. Mm-hmm.
Thank you. Commissioner Collins.
And since we have you here, then I'm just wondering how many of your students would normally fit into the IPS boundaries and go to IPS schools?
It's over 80%.
And in future, for all of our innovation charters, then I would like to see how well our actual students from IPS are doing compared to those who may be coming from the suburbs and potentially be more enriched as far as experience or foundational skills, that sort of thing.
I'm sure that there's a way that we can disaggregate the data to show that as well.
Thank you. I appreciate it.
Mrs. Herron, can I clarify, what is the FRL percentage of students at your middle school?
92%.
Okay. Commissioner Slack.
Yes, I had another thing I wanted to ask. Now, how do you manage your accountability, per se? So, your data's not where you want it to be. It's not where we want it to be. We all know this. So what is the accountability factor that lies within your program?
So our teachers get weekly observations and feedback through our walkthroughs and monitoring system. So we're constantly looking at that data weekly and monthly, school leaders, network leaders, and sharing it with teachers. As far as student data goes, we look at that weekly. We have weekly data meetings with each of our teachers looking at the highest leverage piece of student work from that week. How are students performing? We break that down by subgroups, and then they create reteach plans for the next week. So just constantly having the data review cycles of both how our leaders are providing our teachers feedback and how our teachers are adjusting instruction based on our students.
Thank you. Appreciate it.
Any additional questions, commissioners? All right. Well, thank you for answering those questions, and to our guests. All right. So, commissioners, I'd like to entertain a motion to approve Resolution 7939 and enter into an innovation agreement with Purdue Polytechnic North, as well as Monarca Academy. So I'm asking for a motion to approve the resolution. Well, actually, you know what? Do we need to, I'm asking for some parliamentary coaching here. Do we need to adopt the actual resolution uniquely, which would mean we need to decouple, or we can bundle everything together?
I mean, there could be a motion to approve both resolutions.
Okay, all right. So to clarify, those resolutions are, okay. So seeking a motion again, and my apologies, commissioners, to approve Resolution 7939 to enter into the innovation agreement with Purdue Polytechnic, as well as approval of the resolution to enter into an innovation agreement with Monarca Academy. Do I have a motion and a
So
second?
moved.
Second.
A motion and a second on the floor, Commissioner. Sorry for muddying that up a little bit.
Question?
And I'm sorry, I'm just going to
Yeah.
clarify. So that the motion is to approve both resolutions, 7939 and 7940.
7940. Okay, Commissioners, I'm going to restate that.
Well, okay.
Yeah, I just want to make sure we're, and I apologize for that. 7939 and Resolution 7940 are the two resolutions, one being Purdue Polytechnic North, the other one being for Monarca. So we have I want to make sure I'm clarifying that. We have a motion, and did I hear a second? Yes. Okay, we have a second. Okay. Any further discussion, Commissioners? Colin?
I just want to make sure this is for the 1-year agreement.
This is, Go ahead, Dr. Johnson.
Both innovation agreements for each school, both Monarca and Purdue Polytechnic North, are 5-year innovation term agreements.
So this is,
with
okay,
the 1-year facility usage for both as well.
so that's all rolled in as one?
Yeah, so I think and I apologize for muddying that up. So we have a motion. I need to create a motion, I think, and let me start over here. A motion to approve the adoption of and the entry of Monarca and Purdue Polytech North into the Innovation Network is one piece. The other piece is, as Dr. Johnson said, the 1-year facility agreement, which is noted in Resolution 7939 and 7940.
I'm sorry if I may. So
thank you, please.
what's before you are potential proposed innovation agreements with Purdue Polytechnic North and Monarca Academy. Those agreements, both are 5-year agreements, and Jamie, feel free to hop in. Both are 5-year agreements. Both have a 1-year facility usage clause. So nothing separate here. The resolution 7939 is to enter into that innovation agreement with Purdue Polytechnic North, which encompasses the 1-year facility usage. 7940 is a resolution that would propose to enter into an innovation agreement with Monarca, which encompasses a 1-year facility usage term. So, in my opinion, the motion before the board handles all of that, and if approved, would enter into these innovation agreements with Purdue Polytech to operate North and Monarca.
Mr. Bernlohr, thank you so much for being to my right side. Commissioner Slack.
Yes. So again, clarifying
Yes.
that you're saying that these agreements are attached to the 1-year agreement and they're not separate. That's what we're saying, right?
Yeah, the facility usage is simply a term of the innovation agreement.
Thank you.
Mr. Slack, any additional questions? Make sure.
My clarification was that they were agreements, and then whether or not the separate part was whether or not we wanted it in the facility or not.
So initially, when I proposed that we could decouple, there was a consensus that we would package those. I just muddied up the packaging of the two before we got to the next two, and I apologize. I was thinking about entering into the Innovation Network family as one batch, the second being the renewal of the existing Purdue Polytech that's already in the family, coupled with Avondale Metal renewal. So new entrants and renewal were the batching or the coupling I was talking about as two separate buckets there. So I confused that, so I apologize for that.
You're not the confusing factor. The confusing factor for me is that whether I want to enter into agreement with these two programs or schools, whether or not we want to provide them with buildings. Those two, in my mind, as a commissioner, was separate.
Okay, so why don't we, I mean, there's no issue here if we take a step back and independently make a motion, I can entertain a motion for the innovation agreement for Purdue Polytech North, for the innovation agreement for Monarca, then we can continue with Resolution 7939, then Resolution 7940.
Built into it.
So, so
I apologize for.
What's before the board is the product of some great work by Jamie's team and the teams from Monarca and Purdue Polytech, and those negotiations resulted in the agreements that are proposed before you. I don't believe, I don't want to speak out of turn, but I don't believe that there's any entering into an innovation agreement without the facility usage for the year is not before the board.
Correct. So so I think you're thinking of it correctly, Commissioner Slack, that the use of the facility is a term within the innovation agreement. So they actually aren't separate votes or separate documents. The use of the facility is a term within that agreement. So in that way, it's sort of an all or nothing proposition that's being put in front of the board. If you vote to approve it, you are saying the term of facility usage is acceptable. And if not, then neither of those things would exist. Does that make sense?
So it's a 5-year innovation partnership, and built into that is a 1-year use of the facility.
Correct. And after that year, in both agreements, there is a term that says the facility's occupation is terminated June of 23. That is in both agreements, but those are not separate documents.
So the resolutions are appendices to the innovation agreement, just to clarify that. So we are adopting 2 innovation agreements in one batch, right? Purdue Polytech North Monarca, the resolutions are subordinate to the overall greater master innovation agreement. Clear as mud. My apologies. Yeah, so we have a motion, we have a second, commissioners. Commissioner Allen.
Yeah, there's some language in the PPHS agreement about the state and claim to the facility. Is that correct? Can you elaborate on that, Dr. Johnson, again?
Correct. In the discussion and negotiations with the Purdue Polytechnic High School North team, or with Scott and his network team, there is also language in the agreement that Purdue Poly would not exercise any claim to the building through the $1 law.
Thank you for that clarification.
Commissioner Arnold.
I'd just like to explain my vote. I will be supporting the resolutions for Purdue Polytech and Monarca. I think for very different reasons. I think Purdue Polytech's been a great opportunity for our students. They've performed well. I was glad to see students and parents come and talk about how important the school was for them. I'm glad they're going to be able to use Broad Ripple because I think it's a beautiful facility. And, if we consider students who attend innovation schools as IPS students, they deserve the highest quality facilities that we can provide. I will support Monarca because I think their leader has done a great job in reaching out to the community. My hope is that it's clearly focused on the Latino population. My hope is that there will be other students that will also come. I know that's, being at Northwest, it's a very internationally diverse community, and I hope those students, other students will be able to go and take advantage of what I believe will be a great learning opportunity, and I look forward to visiting both programs in the future.
Thank you, Commissioner Arnold. Commissioner Slack.
Yes. Well, now I'm clear as mud. I have to do a little reevaluating. I feel that PPHS may be a great school with great opportunities. My concerns lie on the difficulty environment that we have created around Broad Ripple and how the community has not really healed from our decision to close that building. I also feel that a permanent decision with this building needs to be made, thus through sustainability and rebuilding stronger. And thus my decisions going forward, it should be driven by racial equity. So I have a concern with voting for them to be permanently or 1 year involved when we're still making a decision about rebuilding stronger. Monarca, after much thought and consideration on the determination of programs versus schools, understanding the needs of what Emily Bishop describes as windows, mirrors, and doors. The need of relationship building is important for our students. But what I don't understand is how placing a school with an already 2 programs in the same building will not cause disruption, tension amongst these programs. I have a concern. Accountability is where I find myself. As a commissioner, a parent, and a citizen, we have to keep using models that are proven to work and use the data that we are given to drive high quality academic performances for schools and to replicate those models. While engaging in programs like Monarca, I feel like that each school should be ensured with these greatest benefits for our students to be able to see themselves in the curriculum and the school administrators, where families feel like they belong and they live in the reality of their experiences. I have a concern with them being in the same building. I thus love the program. I thus love the language of the program and the students that will be attending. Also, I thus have concerns with the low attendance that we are being given with the number of students that are going to be there. So that will be driving my vote tonight.
Thank you, Commissioner Slack. Commissioner Collins.
So you want discussion now then, right? Okay. All right. So my concern with Purdue Polytechnic was that I heard a lot from the students that they were missing gymnasium and the sports facilities, which we already rent to other schools. So that's nothing that's stopping that's PPS-HS from also accessing. One of my concerns, and perhaps I should have asked earlier, but that the school, the ninth grade started out with 54 kids, then went up to 60, 64, and then graduated 21. So I'm not really excited about that. And I wonder if those were students who went back to their township schools or if they were students who came to our IPS schools. And so I really don't have a problem with them being in the building for a year. I just would like to see more, I guess, cohesiveness, more accountability, more reaching out with a real partnership in a charter agreement with us as innovation. As for Monarca, I have the utmost regard for Francisco Valdesera. I know him personally. I know what a great educator he is, and my heart is with the Hispanic community in this city. I'm just really concerned with 3 principals in one building, and that to me spells chaos. Who is the boss, and who's in charge here? And so I have some misgivings about that, as well as the segregation of Hispanic communities in in our city. We have wide-ranging Hispanic and Latinx students in Crystal House Academy, in Tech, at Washington. So how will another high school that in a district that's already saturated with high schools, high school that focuses clearly on on one particular community and one particular culture, I just see that as not very equitable at all. So I think we can improve definitely in our embracing the immigrant communities, whether they're Sudanese or Afghanistani or Chin or Spanish-speaking. I definitely think we can improve, and I'd like to see us improve as a district. I just don't see, I'm not convinced that having a school that focuses on Spanish-speaking or Latinx culture is where we want to go. So that will affect my vote tonight.
Thank you, Commissioner Collins. Commissioner Pritchard.
Okay. Thank you. I do agree, I will say, with some of all that has been said by the 3 commissioners so far. Good points. My thoughts on Purdue is have an existing partnership that has been successful. It is a good school. We have heard stories about 2 nights ago, last year, about the inclusiveness with transgender and minority students. They do offer a unique program. We heard about the excitement around the passion projects, but they offer a broad, unique program that we do not offer in the district. And they have a compelling connection to a university that we also do not offer. So because of this existing partnership we have and the uniqueness and the success of the school, I don't know how we do not enter into this partnership, personally. I share the same thoughts about Broad Ripple High School, but I also agree with Commissioner Arnold that it is there, it is existing. We should utilize it to some degree with a partner that we value. So that's my thought about Purdue. On Monarca, I agree with Commissioner Collins on several of your points and your concerns. I do think it also offers a unique program that we do not offer. And we do have an operator that has a lot of experience with IPS, which I think is a great start. I am concerned about the co-location in the building, but I will say if we were ever to consider that decision, now is the perfect time in the context of rebuilding stronger, because this gives us a chance to reimagine that building. And maybe it's with these same three schools, maybe these three schools, maybe it's a different combination, maybe it's a different program at the other schools. I don't know this, and I'm not necessarily recommending that, but I think that co-location is tricky to pull off, but I think we're at the perfect time to consider it because we're in the middle of rebuilding stronger. So because of that, I think it's a good time to move forward on that front. I am supportive of both proposals for those reasons. Have always been concerned about the innovation schools not seeming to be as strong members of the family of IPS schools. And so I mentioned that at the meeting before. I hope that both these schools continue to think of us as a family. And I know we made adjustments to the innovation agreement, which I appreciate the team making, because I do want to strengthen this connection and make it seem like when we walk into Monarca and we walk into Purdue, that it feels like they're part of the IPS family. So I really hope both partners continue that trend, and I hope to see that, and I know it's in this in this agreement, but I hope we see that in the agreements going forward. So I'll be supporting both proposals, so thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Pritchard. Commissioners, I could not be here Tuesday, and I'm debating whether or not I'm really here right now with my fumbling and mistakes relative to the motion packaging, so I apologize for that. But what I'm very clear on is my support for both of these motions or recommendations. Purdue Polytech is already a member of the IPS family. To me, this makes sense. They have demonstrated their effectiveness. They've demonstrated a hyper-focus on their innovation, a method of instruction. They've definitely, certainly, as we talk about, their clear and concise pathway to post-secondary options. It's very clear to me. And so I do want to acknowledge that that piece, as Commissioner Pritchard noted, the connection with Purdue University is significant. We aspire for our children to have, and students within the IPS family, to see themselves, whatever that might be, but to see all the options and that window into that post-secondary world, to see that, to visualize that and imagine that and be connected, whether it be year 2, year 3, or 4 is important. So I want to acknowledge that that's critically important. I think to also speak to the Broad Ripple High School piece, we're working through that relative as we think about rebuilding stronger. To hear and to know that we have students that as we discuss this recommendation, that some are in one building and some have to walk down the street multiple blocks to another building. If you've had a chance to be on Broad Ripple Avenue recently, it's under construction. And we just came out of the winter season. And so I want to acknowledge that doesn't make sense to me to have kids travel all the way down, teachers travel, coaches travel back and forth during an instructional day. We talk about attendance, we talk about academic outcomes. So I just want to acknowledge that that's a critically important piece, is to create some sustainability for a temporary, I will stress that option, because we know that our friends at Purdue Polytech will be constructing a new facility for their program to bring those students together in the campus or in the building that's a little bit further to the north of Broad Ripple High School, as well as the prospective location. So I want to acknowledge that as well. And so I will be in support of this particular resolution, or this motion, not resolution, both. The other piece is I do want to speak to Monarca and absolutely in support of this recommendation from our administration. I've had a chance to watch Monarca's school leader out in the community and work. I bumped into him at the Central Library. He didn't know that I saw him, but I did see him on the soccer field. And I've seen him in many other places in our community spreading the word of Monarca. I've seen multiple parents, advocates, and supporters, not only on the platform, but across our community, advocating in support of Monarca. I do agree that there certainly are complexities operationally when we talk about how students from multiple school programs exist in the building, but I concur with Commissioner Pritchard's logic here that this is a great time to figure this out. And I'm excited about, I think this will be no easy lift, certainly for the administration. This will be a testament of as we talk about loose and tight and consistency and and communication will be key. But I do believe that as many family members and parents and educators have come to this podium and advocates to talk about the importance of this unique model, particularly as it aligns to some of the guiding principles in our Rebuilding Stronger efforts, Commissioners, that we presented to the administration. There are strong synergies here. Clearly, there is demand and need for this type of program within our community, and particularly, I think it's a quiver in our hat to be able to include Monarca as part of the IPS family. So I will absolutely be in support of both of the motions or recommendations and look forward to casting a yes. So with that being said, because I guess we're in the midst of any further discussion, all those in favor of entering into the innovation agreements with Purdue Polytechnic North and Monarca Academy, please say aye.
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 Aye. Any opposed? The resolution and the motion is approved. All right. Yeah. All right, so we somehow, not sure how I screwed that up, but we did package the first two. The next motion will be much more simple, all right? So finally, Commissioners, any questions for the administration related to the recommendation to renew innovation agreements for Purdue Polytechnic, Inglewood, or Avondale Meadows Middle School? Commissioner Slack.
Yes. I still lie on the point of accountability, and that lies between the district and the innovation agreements that we have. And I feel like that, yes, they have done an immense job when it comes to doing better than our Harshman and other standalone middle schools. But I feel like there's still work to be done. After 5 years of being in an agreement, we should see better data. And I have a concern with that. Even though my decision may be a yes tonight, I still harp on the fact that we need to see more accountability, and it needs to be in the agreements and the contracts that we write up with our innovation schools. If our district schools have to follow some of this loose and tight frame, then some of our innovation agreements need to have the same framework. So yes, I may be voting for this, but I'm still harping on the fact that I need to see better data. Parents need to see better data. Students deserve better data.
Thank you, Commissioner Slack. I would entertain a motion to authorize the administration to renew the innovation agreements with Purdue Polytech Inglewood and Avondale Meadows. Do I have a motion?
So moved.
Have a second. We have a motion and a second on the floor. Commissioners, any further discussion? Hearing none, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? The renewals are approved.
Thank you, Commissioners, for that robust discussion. I know a lot of very intentional thinking and reflection. So welcome to Monarca and Purdue Poly North and to the IPS family of schools. Item 8.02 is a revision to our 22-23 school year calendar. As a reminder, the administration is recommending a small change to the calendar, changing February 21st, 2023 from an asynchronous student learning day and a school-based staff professional development day to a regular in-person instructional day for students and staff in response to some recently passed legislation at the state level. So we request the board's approval at this time.
Thank you, Dr. Johnson. Commissioners, any questions or comments regarding the proposed revision to the 22-23 school year calendar? Commissioner Slack.
Yes. Quick question along the lines. I know it's nothing to do with what we're going to be voting on tonight, but is there a way for us to move our calendar? I didn't know that Dina, until she presented tonight, was having problems with actually being able to give out more free and reduced lunches on the breaks. Is there ways that we can mesh our calendar together where we can actually still be able to qualify for that program?
Unfortunately, the federal guidelines are it must be that 10-day break. So because our breaks are just 1 week for fall and 1 week for spring, we can't get reimbursed. So we could choose to still do meals. However, we would be eating that cost and there would be no reimbursement for that. So at this point, we've not made that decision, but it's that federal guidelines around the 10 days that's the line.
Even if we do, like last time when we had COVID, we did a week where we actually were in attendance and a week where we were not in attendance. even if we do something around that line, will we still be able to qualify for the program?
Yeah, because they did make the guidelines more flexible during COVID so that, it was just do what you need to do to serve kids, but they've shifted that. So now we're sort of back to those regulations.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right, thanks.
Thank you for the question. I would entertain a motion to approve the revised 22-23 school year calendar. Do I have a motion? We have a motion to second on the floor. Commissioners, any further discussion? Hearing none, all in favor say aye. Aye. Any opposed? Modified calendar is approved.
Thank you very much. Item 8.03 is a proposed amendment to the Susan Leach School 68 MOU that we have with the City of Indianapolis. Zach Mulholland provided a brief update on Tuesday outlining that this amendment would just allow the city to continue to store some materials at the building for an extended time. And so we request the board's approval at this time.
Commissioners, any questions or comments regarding the proposed extension of the MOU with the City of Indianapolis? Commissioner Allen.
Yes, I just want to thank Zach for getting us that information. I think that's phenomenal work that's being done in our building to serve families and students throughout our city. So again, thank you for getting us that follow-up information.
Thank you, Commissioner Allen. I would entertain a motion to authorize the administration to enter into the proposed MOU. Do I have a motion?
So moved.
Motion and a second on the motion?
Second.
Second on the floor. Any further discussion? All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Now the administration is authorized to enter into this MOU.
Thank you. Item 8.04 is the administration's request to place a historical marker at Crispus Attucks High School to commemorate the remarkable artistic accomplishments of one of our Crispus Attucks alums, Felrith Hines. Mr. Bernler provided a brief overview on Tuesday evening, and we request the board's approval at this time.
Commissioners, any questions or comments regarding the placement of this historical marker at Crispus Attucks High School?
So moved.
I would entertain a motion to approve the placement of the historical markers. I heard a motion and a second. Can I? Okay. Do we have a motion and a second on the floor? Any further discussion? All in favor say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Hearing none, the placement is approved.
Thank you. Item 8.05 is the administration's request to the board to move a plaque commemorating the track and field and cross-country accomplishments of Manual High School alumni from its current home in Manual High School to the Track and Field and Cross-Country State Museum in Terre Haute. You can see that this request is supported by the Alumni Association of Emmerich Manual High School, and we request the board's approval at this time.
Commissioners, any questions or comments regarding the proposed donation? Commissioner Slack.
I just am really excited that they got the community's input on this before just making a decision. I want to kudos that. That's it.
Thank you, Commissioner Slack. I would entertain a motion to approve the donation.
So moved. Second.
Motion and second on the floor. Any further discussion? Hearing none, all in favor say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Hearing none, the donation is approved.
Item 8.06 is a proposed revision to Board Policy 0160. The policy updates public comment opportunities in order to be aligned with recently passed legislation. Mr. Bernler provided a brief update to commissioners on Tuesday. This item will sit for the requisite 30 days.
Commissioners, any questions or comments regarding the proposed amendments for Mr. Bernler?
I do have a question.
Commissioner Arnold.
Just clarification. I know that we're adding public comment to the work session, but then will people still have to sign up ahead of time with the same?
No. The way the policy is being amended, registration and sign up will only be required at the agenda review and action sessions. So we'll likely have a sign up sheet at the door at work sessions, audit, and finance committees for those who would like to
That's
speak.
right, because that is also included. Okay, I just wanted that clarification. Thank you.
Commissioner Pritchard.
I don't know if this is the right time to bring this up, but just curious if we can make it easier to offer public comment by eliminating the requirement that you have to sign up the day prior to the scheduled meeting. Why not the day of the meeting prior to noon?
And Mr. Bernler, jump in if you want to clarify that. I think the opportunity here is for this policy to delay for 30 days. I think that's something that we can discuss further.
Okay.
Yeah.
Just a thought.
Yeah.
To make it easier.
I mean, if that would be, these are your policies, if that would be the pleasure of the board, that can be done. Might ask for some opportunity for some feedback from the administration, just in terms of perhaps knowing if there are large groups coming out in support of or against something in advance, but could be done, certainly.
Yeah, we can discuss it further, but maybe there's an administrative reason why we couldn't. I'm just thinking of ways to make it easier to offer public comment.
That's a great question, Commissioner Pritchard. I do know that per statute, or per mostly your amended law, is that by July, essentially, we're obligated to affirm this policy. So, and frankly, it's the will of the board at any point in time to revisit that policy and to sharpen it as we go. So I appreciate that question, and we can have further dialogue. Again, I will remind, as Dr. Johnson noted, that the proposed amendment of Board Policy 0160 will sit on the table for 30 days pursuant to Board Policy, and we would anticipate taking action on this proposal in June. Certainly open to further dialogue for sure. And this brings us, Commissioners, to Section 9 of the agenda. Do we have any Commissioners that would like to offer any closing remarks? All right, hearing none, Commissioners, I'm going to pass to Dr. Johnson for any closing remarks you might have.
Next week is Teacher Appreciation Week, so I just invite you all to join me in sending lots of gratitude and appreciation to our teachers next week.
I do have a comment. I think it's administrators, somebody's appreciation day. Well, I think we should show our appreciation to our administrative person, lunch lady, snack guy. So, again, thank you for all the work you do on our behalf.
Thank you for your service.
Thank you, Andy, for going to Costco.
All right, Commissioners, it moves us to item 10 of the agenda, which is adjournment. Our next meeting is scheduled for May, which is a work session on Tuesday, May 17th. Having completed all the items on this evening's agenda, this meeting stands adjourned.